He was watching it and he got to watch my car explode. The issue with something like that happening is everyone in a huge radius has heard it. You know, if they're ready for us to be coming down, they now know where we are.
This conversation is between 2nd Commando Regiment veteran Damien Thomlinson and Thistle Productions co-founder Angus Hordern. Damien lost both his legs in Afghanistan due to an improvised explosive device in 2009. He's gone on to become a motivational speaker, author, actor, golfer, and more. They spoke in Angus's office in Sydney's North Shore.
I'm Angus Hordern, speaking today with Damien Thomlinson. Damien, welcome to Life on the Line.
Thanks for having me, mate. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you guys do when it comes to speaking to veterans. I've seen, I think personally experienced how much impact it can have being able to share your experiences and stories with the public of Australia. And having listened to your podcast before, it's an honour to be sitting in the seat, mate. Thanks for having us.
Oh, well, thank you, Damien. It sort of makes it a bit easy for us when we've got great guys and girls, to share their stories. Let's kick off with your childhood, mate.
Okay. Yeah. Which bit of the childhood would you like to go to first?
Well, let's talk about sort of where you grew up. What sort of drove you? Was there any military history in your childhood?
Yeah. Okay. My grandfather first he was one of the rats at Tobruk. He spent 5 years serving in World War II, and that was always a big thing. You always knew when you were going to see Pop that he was in the war and he was slowly starting to slow down. From what I can remember, he passed when I think I was 8 years old. And as a kid, he was a talented sportsman from what I hear. Like he was good. My mum and my uncles are both great at golf, and there's golf on the other side. The whole family's into it, which is kind of convenient with what's happened. But I always sort of spoke about what he did. He'd had a hat trick. I remember he had a mounted ball in their house. That was one of those things that, as a kid you sort of look at, but it takes me a while to sort of dig back to the memories. But that influenced me, I think, when I was young. I played cricket following in his and my uncle's footsteps. And I grew up in a place called Terrigal on the Central Coast, which is about an hour and a half north of Sydney.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somewhere around that, just a nice sleepy sort of coastal town with, I think, some of the good things and some of the coastal things that can work against it a little bit. Some things I've seen culturally that I like a lot better, where I spent a lot of my time in the eastern suburbs of Sydney after I joined the military. I really liked parts of the culture there that I didn't really see in the Central Coast, especially when I was young. And I found myself always wanting to sort of push and do something different, and kept sort of running into what I saw as dead ends. I kept hitting places where I had a reasonable amount of talent, but I found myself sort of sitting back on my hands because that was the more socially acceptable thing to do. You don't want to try as hard as you can or put as much effort in as you can to really hit that next level or do that next amazing thing, because then you're going to be the guy who he's the one he's doing that. You know what I mean? Like you kind of be singled out as someone who actually wants to do the best that they can do. And I think part of that influenced my decision. I'd had like a series of like bad choices looking back as I was finishing high school, and just trying to then fitting into that crowd, and sort of being happy to just put half an amount of effort in because that was what it was cool to do at the time. And I sort of found myself, I was looking around when I was 23 years old. I'd always played a decent level of cricket. Like I was playing first grade when I was like 16, something like that. So I'd always done reasonably well at it. But then to sort of look back and go, okay, so there's a guy, I was really proud that I'd taken this guy's spot bat number 3 in the first grade squad. And I was like, wow, look at that. You've got it sorted. And then I looked, and he's like a vet. He's got his family sorted. He's got his life sorted. He's got all of these things pointing in a good direction. And when I was looking around at what I had and was moving towards, it really wasn't drawing the same picture. So I sort of started to ask, what now? what's the next step in my life? And I did what, I guess kids do. I asked my parents. I went in and sort of spoke to them. I just always tell a story about what I did when I was talking to my dad at the dinner table. I'm like, mate, I started it off strong because you got to. I was like, Dad, you were right. Because he'd always told me, you could do anything that you want to and you choose not to. And I just hate it. He really hated the underachiever in me. And I was like, you were right. Like, how do I change path? And he's like, I wanted to be an architect. I'm like, okay, why aren't you? He's like, because they told me at school I didn't have the right grades. I'm like, Dad, you got a master's degree in applied science. You did a degree in economics. Both of those are pretty mass heavy, right? And he's like, yeah, see, no one can tell you what you want to do. And that's where the conversation finished. It was literally the end of it. And it was probably the best bit of leadership that I've seen, because it was effectively him saying you can make your own decision. I can't tell you what you want to do. You're basically coming to me with the problem of not wanting to, not wanting to have people tell you what you want to do, but then you're wanting me to tell you what I want you to do. Just go out and find it. So I went into Mum's office, or both of their office at the time, looked at Mum's computer because he worked in IT, and I thought he can get me some sort of role in IT, look at what courses I can do. And as I was sitting in there, I'm scrolling through stuff on the computer, and I look, and there's a picture of my granddad, and he's sitting there with it was a Ratchet Brook thing in 1983.
That was the 40th.
Yeah, and so he's standing there, and he's got this really cheeky little grin on that there was something about it that was really powerful, and it moved me, and I was so proud. I was so proud to be his grandson in that moment. I just looked at it and was like, that is awesome. And then with the pride of seeing that, after that, I was just so filled with this sense of shame. And, I think I was 23, and I thought that my life was over. I thought I've wasted my entire life. What am I doing? That was when I made the decision that probably changed everything. I went through the Army website. I was like, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's just something that can steer me in a different direction. And I looked, and they had this incentive called the Special Forces DRS, or Direct Recruitment Scheme. I looked at it and I sort of thought, I've never seen a challenge as too big. A challenge is a thing. That's sort of the fun of it, and never ever big enough type thing. It's one of those. And I looked at it, and from there I sort of saw the polar opposite to the way that I'd been doing everything, and it was something that fit in with my values. Something that fit in with the way that I saw things. You were gonna have to work hard to do it. You were gonna have to sacrifice things to do it. It wasn't taking the easy road, and there wasn't any quit in it. I wasn't gonna have to make excuses for why I was trying to work so hard. I wasn't gonna have to make any of those. And the only person who I could be accountable to at that stage was me. I was the one who was gonna have to take it to that next level. So it changed everything about me, everything about the way that I work, the way that I operate, how I was, down to waking up in the morning, everything. Like, it just totally changed the way that I was about it as a person, and I got good support from my family when I was moving forward towards it. It was awesome, and it's a decision I'm just so glad that I made. In the Central Coast, there's how it felt, and it probably isn't like this for everyone. And I know I was a lot more susceptible when I was young to paying attention to the wrong sort of ideas. But there's things about the Army and my choice to join it that I really love. I'm a huge believer in the fact that you don't, like, blowing someone else's candle out doesn't make yours shine brighter, even if there's only two of you in a box, right? If you're in an environment where you need to light up a field, every single person's candle burning as bright as humanly possible is your only way of achieving your objective. And that's the way I see the Army and the way the culture is around the Army. You really want everyone, you want to nurture the man beside you to be better, and to lift and elevate into a position. Sometimes it's got to be tough love. Sometimes there's only a particular way you can reach that person, but you need that person to be burning, that person's torch to be burning brighter. And I really liked being in that environment. because everyone recognizes that the person next to them is trying to do things to better themselves for the betterment of everyone.
And Damien, it's interesting that you instead of just going into the normal army, you went into the elite army. And not only that, you hadn't got an army background, so a lot of the guys have been in the system, but still it enabled you to come off Civvy Street and have a crack at the very top level and really drive yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. That there were parts of that culture that were difficult to, I guess it's difficult to go into a culture like that, especially when training and actually being at the unit are two completely different things. There's completely different mindsets into every aspect of your training, because through the DRS system you do Kapuka, and I think we were the last guys to only do 49 days. I think we had about 6 weeks there. Then IETs, infantry training, which sort of like I think 5 months, some of that sort, and then advanced infantry training, which is another 2 months on top of that. And then you get panelled for selection. You go down, I think we had another 2 or 3 months before the selection course, and then ended up doing selection. But through that whole process, you're kind of going through the stages. And when I was at Kapuka, I remember I was so keen. I had this picture drawn in my mind of exactly how people would be. I think for the whole year before it, I had my hair cut into a flat top because I thought that's what people would be wearing. No one
the crew
in
cut.
the Australian Army has a flat top. And if they do, people are hassling them. And I was running around just loving it, just thinking it was the greatest thing ever. But when I got there, I mean, I watched Full Metal Jacket probably every day for 4 months, just like I lived and breathed it. I immersed myself in everything that I thought you had to do to be a Special Forces soldier. That meant dealing without sleep, dealing with pain, just never stopping. Through the entire process, my mindset was I'm not going to preempt my body giving up. I'm never, ever, ever going to do that. If I wake up after being carried out of a stretcher, that's when I've given it everything I've got. Until then, I'm going to keep going until that happens. It can't physically or mentally break me. I'm just going to keep going. That's it. And I think the thing with that is you end up with such a good positive reinforcement cycle, because each time you go past that point through your training, and it starts at Kapuka when you're doing a 3K march with 28 kilos on, it feels heavy as hell. It hurts. It's not comfortable, but and you're dealing with it for the first time. It's just a different type of pain. It's just a different type of hard. But then when you get through that, when you've got people, we had one guy who was a blubbering mess because, my shoulder, and he heard it playing tennis or something like that. And he was, you're kind of looking at it going, I don't think that he got the reward, which is at the end of it, which is, that was something different, something I've never been through before that I now feel better for. I'm kind of keen to see how far I can stretch that one. How far can I keep going with it? And that reinforced that type of mindset, which then you just keep moving the finish line further and further away, and then all of a sudden you're doing things that if you gave the person that you were 12 months ago to do,
wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, not even a chance, not even the chance to start it.
And because you're doing it with your mates and everyone's sharing it, you don't want to let them down.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm wildly competitive at everything, but one thing that really, really inspires me is when people are at that point and then push through it. And they're not just pushing through it. They're partly, I guess they're pushing through it for them, but you see people are giving you that little bit of them, everything that they've got. We did a high wire, a roping course, and we're on the tower in Sydney. It's a 7-story fireman's tower, and there was a guy who's nearly crying, seriously nearly crying. He's that scared of heights.
Are you rappelling front first down?
No, we were back first at that stage.
Yeah.
He was just standing on the edge too.
It's still pretty daunting if you haven't done it.
Terrified, but you could see he's shaking, but he's just pushing his body through it. Honestly, it was, and by the third time, he was still hating it, but he could do it without shaking. And there's nothing to me that's really more inspiring than watching someone break through that, because we've all got fears. There's stuff that bothers all of us, and I've never really had a problem with heights. I guess mine's maybe being stuck underwater in murky water. I guess I don't know. It's probably my imagination more than anything, but that seeing people get whipped, I can't do that. That makes me go green. It's horrible. But the watching someone go through that for everyone that's around them and to see that, I find that inspiring for a few reasons. One of them is that no one's telling that guy, saying, hold it together and get your job done. So I think no one's doing that. Everyone's just watching what he's doing and kind of hoping and speaking to him on, come on, let's
do it.
We're here with you for that, because you never know. Down the track, that could be you. You know, I mean, the last thing is someone's reaching up, you want to give them a wrist to grab, not be the person who's walking past them, because a day later you could be the guy reaching up and the last thing you want is everyone to be ignoring you. So, you know, and I think that I found those parts of the training side of stuff. It's just unique. It's a different culture than I've seen in different places, and it creates a bond because you've instantly got that trust that, say, the person who you don't know, who you've got a completely different background, you could have grown up on opposite sides of Australia doing completely different things. You know, we surfed a lot when we were young. Guys in the country don't really get, there's no waves in the country, are there? You know what I mean? Like that, and there's just different ways that you'll make your own fun. When you're young, we rode skateboards. They probably raced dirt bikes or something, you know, or rode horses, or something like that, you know. But then there's people from completely different backgrounds that have a bond of the common goal of going, okay, cool, we're both going through this. Every single person on your team is going to bring things they're great at, and they're going to have things that they're not so great at. You know, in my mind, a good team member is someone who can identify those things that they do, and I guess be that little bit forgiving. It's almost like accepting that at some stage, regardless of the task, there's going to be one guy on the team that fucks up. It's going to happen. You know, I mean, your ability to drop that and move past it really defines your value as a team member. And I liked that being reinforced through so many difficult, arduous tasks, things that were difficult. And typically in the training cycle of things, a lot of the stuff that you're given, they're almost unachievable goals. You know, it would take something nearly superhuman to get to the point that you have to be at with the sandbags you're carrying and all your gear on after having no sleep, eating nothing in an hour and a half. It's near impossible, you know, for an Olympic athlete. It would be near impossible, let alone someone that's done the things that you have. But you're looking at guys who are all sweating the same, who are all in the same amount of pain, you know, that have all got blisters on their feet, that is still stepping forward and going through it. You know, and at the end of it, you end up looking around, and in that place that you're sitting, you see a group of guys who've just proven themselves to each other. You know, and it builds that sort of bond of just going, well, we don't want to, ideally we wouldn't want to do that again, but if we have to, there's no one I'd rather do it with than you guys. Like, that's a different level.
So when you started the course, how many of there were there originally, and how many actually got into selection at the end?
Oh, we started off with 45 or maybe more than that at Kapuka, sections of 11. We lost like 5 or 6 guys just at Kapuka. Not their thing, or a few different things. Some guys dropped out during IATs. I think probably maybe 35 of us got to the point where we could get panelled for selection, but different guys get injured and stuff like that. So it's not all getting removed from the course until you hit selection. When you're at selection, then that's the time where, I mean, looking back at it, it's so much of it is the pressure that you put on yourself. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that I'm being watched. Every single thing that I do could be the make or break moment, when realistically they're sort of looking for one attribute. You know, how's your resilience in this stage? How do you respond when you're under pressure and that tired? How are you with the guys around you at that stage? Like, there's always a specific objective that they've got, and that's really the only thing that they're looking at on a specific day, whereas you think it's absolutely everything that you're doing. So you kind of, it's a bit of a pressure cook. I mean, but like with time, pressure's a really interesting thing, because, and I've done a fair bit of work with this, pressure's entirely imagined. You know, it's literally imagined. You've only got 100% of it. You've only got 100 points of attention that you can give something, and if you can give it those 100% of the points, that's when sports people talk about things being in slow motion. You're literally that focused on what's happening, and doing the action that you're doing, that everything else just melts away. You know, you don't hear the thing that's in the background or something of that sort. Whereas, I mean, the best way I've heard it described is if you're doing a full jump, like say you're a standing jump and you get across, you jump 5 foot. And I say to you, okay, cool, well, let's do 4.5 feet. You jump that. Would you jump it for like $5? You'd say, yeah, okay, no worries. We mark it out on the floor. You do it. Then we go out. I go, okay, cool. You've done that. Let's go outside. Let's do it again. And then there's a puddle. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do it. You want another $5 for that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, no worries. There it is. So you do it again. Then you're starting to laugh at me. You know, you've made a bit of money. You're doing your thing. We're moving forward. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Well, how about from that letterbox over to there? That's the same sort of distance. You know, it's only a 3-foot drop. If you don't make it, the consequences aren't that bad. You want to do it. Okay, yeah, there's another $5. And you're like, okay, sweet. But you're starting to think about it. All of a sudden, there's the injuries that'll happen. There's the this. Where will that happen? If I don't make it, what's everyone going to think of me? You've got all of these different factors that start winding up until you do it. And I say, okay, cool. For double or nothing, the gap between those roofs with a 4-story drop is the exact same distance. All of a sudden, that 4 foot becomes a long way. It becomes a really long way when all you have is the really simple action, which is a foot behind what you're personally capable of. You know, and then going through that mindset of, okay, cool, how do I then take out that factor of pressure? What do I do? It's just as simple as focusing on your task. What did you do when there was no perceived pressure on it? You focused about the exact action you were taking and the way that you were taking it. But yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit warren. I that stuff sort of fascinates me. The tricks that the human mind does, and I think, and that's getting back to the selection side of things. The whole time you've got that pressure, I think, that you put on yourself, which is something that people who are smart, which when they're doing the selection course, they're wildly intelligent. They've done it before. They know when those things are going to get to you and when to sort of turn that key just to see what you're made of.
So, Damien, with the group that eventually got selected, how many were they then?
We had probably, I think, 6 or 7. Because we ended up in a room that they took us into the room when the course was over, and they were saying numbers, and we're sitting in there, and you're sort of looking at everyone around you, and you're like, okay, cool. So he's here, but he did really badly at this thing. He was amazing at this. He was pretty good. And you're sort of confused because there's good guys walking out, and there's good guys sitting in the room, and like I remember turning to one of my mates and just going, oh man, like your heart's just going through the floor, just going.
After such a big year.
Yeah, we were good, man. Were we good enough? And you literally go through you critique everything that you've done, from how your gear's organised to how you presented to whether you sighed when you walked off something, which is one thing that's heavily frowned upon. It's like I really love that as well. You know, I mean, just there's no type thing. You know, the hell is that noise? Get out type thing. But I remember looking, and then the late Colonel Fleer stood in front of us, and I thought, wow, if we're going to get sent off, we might as well get sent off by him. You know, let's sit there and get ready for it. He said, he did a spiel about the selection course and said, and congratulations, boys, you're the people we're looking for. And I just
fantastic.
That was a huge moment. You know, for me personally, it was like the combination of what I saw as the change between the person that I really detested and what I'd sort of been able to become with the help of the Australian Army.
That was just to get onto the course.
No, that was at the end of the course.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, just the end of the course.
And were there, because you'd gone direct entry, were there other regular Army people who'd served 6 years and then they were in the course as well?
Yeah, so they came in the advanced infantry training. And it's funny because they've got all these great nuggets about how things work when you're back at their battalion. Yeah. You know, they'd tell stories about these different like little war stories, because a lot of time you spend sort of sitting around waiting for your go and doing those different things. And you'd hear all these different bits. Oh, if you do that at your battalion and then this, and people who were all living on, you had these great stories about, you know, how life was for them. And one was at 3 Para. He was great. He was really good fun. And now another guy was from up in Darwin, and they would sort of that sort of tell you about their different experiences and what they did at the battalion. And one was really softly spoken. He was great. So you'd sort of have to fish for more of that, where the other guy was a bit more upfront about sharing his nuggets of wisdom with it and stuff like that. It's just great. Like I found it really cool to be sitting there. They're just this huge different group of people, and you're all going through this same course at Singleton at the time. You know what I mean? Just happy to be in a room that's got no normal furniture or anything like that, watching movies on a laptop, as opposed to having like a TV or a kitchen or any of that type of thing.
So you actually get through at last, and you're approved, and then they start training for counter-terrorism.
Yeah, after that we had there's the reinforcement cycle, which we've got. So after like selection, you then get panelled for the Rio cycle. And that's just a collection of different courses back to back. And as you're slowly going through that, you're starting to sort of become less of a trainee and more of one of the guys. But I think with the direct entry scheme, we were direct entry 5. So it had sort of worn off before we got there. Like it wasn't still as bad. Like direct entry 1 really had it bad. It was an us and them. You haven't done the time. That was the funny thing. I heard that a lot at the start of my career. Get some time up. You've been here since breakfast type thing. And that was the whole thing in the army. It was get some time up. And then by the time I left, you'd have someone who'd been in the army for 3 years and had deployed twice. You know what I mean? Like you'd have a guy 3 or 4 years. So that guy who's got 25 years is going get some time up. And he's like, cool, how much time have you spent in Afghanistan, mate? Stand down. It was sort of like that type of shift that happened in it, which was an interesting one to see the unit go through. I think I was really fortunate with being at the unit through the Afghanistan side of things, just to see the amount of growth that happened, and the evolution of, I think most of the type of training that you're doing in the infantry course was based on doctrine for jungle warfare in Vietnam. People were talking about high country training in Townsville, and how many times you'd done this really war dog 2-week jungle course.
Up at Canagra or something.
Yeah, that's we did. God, we did. We did a 2-week thing when we first got our company, when I first moved into Bravo Company up there. It was awful. It rained the whole time too. We just got our ass kicked, but then you're doing stuff and but then in 12 months, a majority of the stuff that you're doing to not be seen and not make noise and do all these, the attention to detail you need to pay with noise discipline, light discipline, and everything like that in a jungle is totally different to when you're in the open terrain of Afghanistan, the hills or the desert. There are obviously commonalities with it, but it's a totally different type of mindset.
It's funny, Damien, I remember when I was in one commando in the 70s and pre-major engagements, but we learnt that. Like I'd done school cadets and you just bush bash, through the bush. But you would just take an hour to literally go like 100 feet.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's raining and it's horrible.
And how it used to hurt to go so slowly because you just couldn't break a twig sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it was...
noise discipline-wise, you're moving at like 30% of
all this
normal
concealment.
speed. Yeah, you're doing all that type of stuff, and then you're in the middle of a desert where it doesn't really matter. They can see you from 4Ks away.
Yeah.
There's different parts of your craft that you have to like wire tight for that type of warfare. So it was great to see the evolution of that, and all these things that really, like, guys who were green or whatever, it really mattered. You really got to this and that, and then a year later they're sort of like, that doesn't really matter as much.
And just the diversity, like your first deployment, you're on a naval ship going to Fiji.
Yeah, that this job, anyone who was on that job who's listening will just go, he was a nutter about me, which rightly so. So I, at that stage, still pretty green in the unit. And I remember the boss who we had on that trip he was the same guy who ended up as our captain in Afghanistan. And I remember us all sitting in one of the buildings at work, and he goes, look, is there any reason why anyone can't do this job? And we all sort of looked at each other. No one's going to say.
And we signed on for this.
Yeah, but there's a fair few guys who had been put in to bolster up Alpha Company were ex-Delta Company guys who just got back from Afghanistan. So they got back from Rotation 3, which they had a lot of stuff happen on Rotation 3. It was a really, it was a heavy deployment, and we had those guys, a lot of the sort of mortar troop came and joined our platoon, and he sort of said that, and everyone's like, okay, and he goes, so what's going to happen is there's 2 companies that are going to go up. They're going to be sitting on a troop carrier called Canimbla. They're going to be in a battle box just off Fiji. We all knew what we had to do. There's a coup going on. They've seized the ammunition on the docks, and our platoon was just going to basically wait in Townsville. You guys are going to wait in Townsville. You're going to have, there'll be rooms and barracks. Everything will be sorted out. We're going to be living in this little bit ready to go. We're going to be a quick reaction force. So we'll fly in and probably do a paraload follow. So, and that sounds pretty easy, but me being a rookie, I had just didn't have the experience to really know what to pack to go. I didn't take a book. I didn't take my laptop. I think I took a phone, but that's pretty much useless when you're in that spot of the water. I just had nothing to entertain myself, and I have the worst ADD. I don't know. I've never been in anyone else's mind, but it's bad. And so when we get to Townsville, I'm expecting to sort of wave goodbye to the other 2 platoons and okay, cool, have fun on the boat, boys. That'd be great. When we get there, he's gone. The boss is gone. Okay, guys, it's been a change of plan. We're on the boat now. What? I didn't even have a magazine. I had nothing to keep myself entertained. And then next minute we're on this boat, which was wildly overloaded with people. They had so many people on it. And just getting used to it. And the Navy, doing their thing, played Groundhog Day on the TVs for the first 3 days. And I couldn't sleep on it. We had 130 guys or something all sleeping on a level that was supposed to house, I think 100 max for, I think the maximum amount of time you were supposed to be in a space like that was 2 or 3 days. That's how the ship was designed. And so after about a week, I couldn't sleep. I could only sleep when the guys went out because it was too hot. They just didn't have a ventilation system. And I don't know if you've ever slept in between 2 men, but that's what it felt like. Your bunk was about this big. It was the worst, the absolute worst.
I've slept on an Oxley submarine in the hot bunking where the bunking is that big. You can't actually roll. So
it's awful. You can't roll. You
can't move.
Pivot your shoulders, and it wasn't.
I get it.
It wasn't that enjoyable, but I think a couple of weeks in, you're starting to get over the fact. You go into your intelligence brief each night, and they're just so the 2 guys who are worried are going to go to war were sitting next to each other drinking beer at a rugby match. And it's you sort of going, okay, well, get us home. Can we go? Is this happening?
Nothing happening. Let's go.
Yeah, but you continually, and you've always got to be at sort of action to move. And I was just so bored. I ended up walking laps in between the bunks to the point where at some stage, I think more than one person said, "Man, would you stop? Or I'm gonna hit you." And at that stage, I'm like, well, please. That's literally a better case scenario than me still walking, but I can't stop walking because I'm that nervous. It wasn't an enjoyable trip by any means.
Look, that's the army.
You
go where you're told to go, and
General Haimarsh, when we were on the way back from East Timor, he got a plane with us, and everyone's got their questions right. Everyone wants to move their career forward, and so it's. General High Marshal, we'll have a chat to him about whatever. He sat next to me and he goes, "So, have you got anything you want to talk about?" I'm like, "Yeah, why'd you leave us on Canimbla?" Literally the first thing that I said to him, there was no niceties, and he goes, "Look, it's a lot harder to get you guys back than it is to send you out. Do you know how much money?" I'm like, "Money? You're telling me about money? Really? Are we doing this?" But I think the thing, the army can be a big world and it can be a really small world. And when we got on Canimbla, I remember walking past someone who had long hair. I sort of looked at him and he had a beard. I'm like, I know this guy. And playing cricket and baseball when I was young, you know a lot of people from the area, and I played reps in both of those sports. So, and you travel a bit. So I was like, I know this guy from somewhere. And I was walking past. I said, "Hey man, do you play baseball or something? Do I no. And he's gone, man, I'm glad you cut your hair, because I used to have this horrible long hair when I was young, and like they said Goldilocks, and he sort of said, I'm glad you cut it. I used to play cricket for Toukley. He played first grade against us, and I top scored that game. We got rolled, but I batted all right. But I remember kind of going, oh, that's cool. Okay, I remember that. Yeah. And from then on, it sort of took me back to a different thing. But I was up on the smoking deck one day, because that's kind of was the social thing on the ship. Everyone would go up and you'd all be on even people who didn't smoke. It was sort of like a thing that.
It was the gathering
place.
place.
Yeah, it would give you 10, 15 minutes. And there was a huge amount of people there, and they were doing a counter-terror thing, like a sniper training with two of the choppers. And then all of a sudden we hear this bang, and then there's like, you look up and there's rotor blades flying in the air, and oh no. And then Rufus, who was he was our CSM at the time, he yelled. It was like he was in a movie. He just, take cover. He kind of gave that one, which he'd probably been waiting to say for so long. But, you've kind of I remember ducking down, being near the stairs, sort of turning and seeing him run up. I ran after him, like onto what was the comms deck. They had all this comm stuff stuck up that you normally couldn't go, but, under the circumstances. And I saw him reaching back with his arm going 1, and he was counting. What the hell is he counting? And I went and looked, and by that stage you couldn't see the chopper, you could only see bubbles. And there were 2 people who'd popped up at that stage, and we had 6 pop up on our side of the boat. We're counting them. I'm just like, okay, wow, there was more than 6 people in that chopper. Oh no. Right then you kind of had this moment of going, this is a really serious situation that we're in right here. Okay.
And the ship's still moving on.
I think we were stagnant at that stage. I think we'd stayed in the one spot and they were circling doing training. I think I can't 100% remember.
Did they get any of the guys back?
They got 2 came up on the other side of the boat. That's how deep they were by the time they got out. One was the captain, Mark Bingley, who he died when they got him onto the deck.
Yeah.
And it took days. They turned comms off on the boat so that no one could. The Navy get very upset when you call it a boat as well. Yeah. It's a ship.
A submarine. Submarine's a boat.
Yeah, well, they're like, oh, it's a ship. Yeah. It's a ship. It's a boat. And then, I see. I'm still dirty on it. I haven't been on a cruise ever in my life based on that. I'm just like, well, they'll all be the same, won't they? I'm not really, But we had the comms break, which that was hard because you couldn't. We all knew we weren't going to say anything, but you couldn't sort of speak to your family about what had happened until the families had been notified. Because there was one guy who didn't come back off it, and it wasn't until they didn't tell us, no one said anything. We saw it at the same time as everyone else. So everyone's literally standing in this bottom room watching the news, and then Josh's face pops up on the screen, and that was the job became very, very, very real at that stage. There's been different. I don't know, you had different thoughts about what it was going to be like and what you had to mentally and emotionally prepare yourself for. But when it becomes real, it's always something different. You can't read the label from inside the bottle type thing. And that was the first.
And you weren't even in a war zone.
No, that's it. And it was just scary. And then when you're training to do the helo stuff, that chopper went down a lot quicker than the stuff does in the training things. It was a really scary experience.
And in the training, you're actually ready for the chopper to crash to get out of it. Whilst these guys are just waiting for the routine landing on the deck to get out, let the next guys in.
No, I think they were doing landings and then peeling back off. So the snipers were essentially covering the deck while the other chopper came into land, and then they would redo a different serial with the different snipers. And just do tag in, tag out. And it was, it was kind of like a hard
baptism
pill to swallow at the time, especially since at that stage I didn't want to be there. I really didn't. I think I just had, I felt like my life was in order at some stage. I had a girlfriend back home that made it a little bit hard, but I just wasn't really, I kind of lost part of the desire that I'd had at the stage, because it's just all right, well, we're all in the same storm, but this is It's pretty ordinary. And I remember our boss at the time said, look, there's good things on the way, like just stay in. Essentially, they knew that we were getting the call to do rotation 4 the next year. And I just said, I don't care. I have no idea why you think I would care about this. And this is literally me speaking to the major who was in charge of us, who's our OC. I'm just like, I don't care, man. Like, I don't want to, I didn't have my heart in it. So it was kind of good that, I guess what happened from there. Because when we went back to the unit, if you were getting punished for something, you would get sent across to a place like where they operated the watercraft. You were essentially part of boat platoon, and it wasn't exactly a highly regarded position. And because of my insolence when it came to the boss, I got to spend the next 8 months, it worked out, over in boat platoon, just sort of revisiting whether I wanted to be a part of the unit and what I wanted to do there. And it turns out it was probably 8 of the best months that I've spent in the Army. I mean, you drove the ribs, the rigid hull inflatable boats around the harbour. It was just gorgeous places you had to go with them, and a good group of people, and it really gave me the spark to want to get back out there and
see some action.
Yeah, and really find my feet at the unit and get used to the way that it worked and who you had to be. Because I think before that had happened, that really humbling experience, I sort of thought I had to be someone other than myself there. You know what I mean? Everyone knows you can't be a square block in a round hole at a place like that. I was trying so hard to be a round block for the round hole that I was kind of making myself the square block. You know what I mean? Majority of it was just inside my head.
So Damien, did they deploy you to Timor next before Afghanistan?
Yeah. So
and how did you find Timor?
It was great. Like, finding out I was going there was really cool because we were doing something. I'd sort of been asking, going, guys, can I get back to the companies? And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll see when it comes around. And you're sort of at the mercy of it. And in my mind, I spent 5 months wanting to be back at a company so badly. I was like, okay, you just got to accept. It was a really good growing process for me to be there and go, okay, so that's what you've got to do to be able to now get your game together. Want to be there or no one will want you there type thing. And then I got a call when we were doing just a basic rib training work in the Georges River. We're doing stuff out there. And then I get this call saying, hey, are you good to go to Timor? And I'm like, yeah, I am, for sure. And he goes, oh, sweet, you leave Friday. I'm like, it's Wednesday. And he goes, yeah, so you probably better get back and start getting ready. And I'm like, that's awesome. So I was like, and then I kind of had that sort of drive back. I'd been spending a lot of time making sure that when I got back to a company, I was going to do my best sort of work. I was really going to get back to the original focus that I had when I first got into the Army and get that bit of passion back. And East Timor was great. I had a great team. I had a phenomenal, our team commander was really generous with what he did and the knowledge he gave to you. He knew that I was greener than, that I was still reasonably green, but he was really happy to sort of give me the little nuggets of wisdom that sometimes were hard to come across. You know what I mean? Like, he really took a nurturing role to point me in the right direction with a great team of guys as well. They were just awesome. Like, Jim was great. Dave, mate, all of these guys were just phenomenal. Really pushing you to go forward and do your best. And Timor was just a great learning experience of going, so this is what it takes when you're on deployment. You've got to, I think I was ready to roll with the punches a little bit more when I got to East Timor. And we'd spend time doing different things, and it was really a great feeling to be back in a team, like doing the things and really seeing where I should fit into the equation. It was really organised, and it was a really awesome trip that we were on. But also, I didn't have a girlfriend back home. I was just doing it with me, with no need to get back.
There's no baggage
for any time. Yeah. Plus, I had this one moment where it kind of made me regret the way that I behaved there was a lot of things that made me regret the way I behaved in Canimbla. But when we were over in Timor, there was a guy who I was working out with, and we'd always race each other. It would always be who could lift the most, who could do the most of everything, and who could run the fastest. And he was always a little bit better than me, so he's probably the best guy to do it with because you always work harder.
Yourself, yeah.
And table tennis. Table tennis was my thing, but when we were back at the A-pod, I could play and I'd be reasonably good. But I remember having this convo. He was pretty stoic. He didn't do too much. And I remember sort of speaking to him one day, walked in, he's sitting on his stretcher. I'm like, mate, what's up? Like, what, are you cool? And he looked at me and goes, oh, it's my son's birthday today. And I was like, oh. And you don't really know how, to sort of respond. So I'm like, mate, how old is he? And he's like, oh, he's 5. It's God, for me, he's so young, it's getting worse, everything I say. I'm like, God, he looked up at me and goes, you don't get it, man. I said, what? And he goes, I haven't seen one of them yet. Oh. And when he said that, I was like, wow, okay. Here I am, like thinking for the whole time at Canimbla, I'm missing my life with my girlfriend or something for no reason, and all these little things, and there's guys who are doing that. It was a reality check that I really needed of what it was going to take to get into that role and really do my best when it came to the work that needed to be done. And I think I got so many good things out of Timor, out of just operating in that team, the simple things that, really made me feel like I'd set into the job and I was ready to do the job that needed to be done. And so when we got back to the unit, we got leave over summer, which was kind of good. We got back just late December. Got leave for most of January. I guess I got back and they go, look, you've been moved to Bravo Company, so go across and get used to it. And I remember I walked into the building. There was a fight at the pub outside the pub at Terrigal, and there were 3 guys picking on one guy. So I thought, well, 2 guys on 3 is probably a little bit fairer. We'll go over and, I'll be the hero. And so I cruise into this knuckle and I end up getting my eye socket shattered. And so the first thing that I've gone in, I've got a freaking black eye. And no, it wasn't. It was after I'd had the operation, to fix the eye socket that I got moved across to there. And so I got in, I've got like this black eye, and this dude just walks down the main thing. And this is the first time I'd stepped into the building. And I remember him looking at me and going, hey. Yeah, do you know what you're doing here? I'm like, yeah, mate, do you? And he looks back at me and goes, yeah, my name's Waco. I'm the OC of the company. Who are you? I'm just like, Private Tomlinson. I've just come across the joining. Good to have you here. Yeah, good to have you here. Looks like you've done it, looks like you've done yourself a bit of a mischief. Kind of does that. So I told him the story and he had a good laugh at the fact that my head came off second best. But yeah, it was a great group of guys that I went into. There was a lot of guys who were on a rotation before that, so they had a wealth of knowledge about it. Just a really cool crew of guys. It was just great to be involved in, you know what I mean? Like you had people from a lot of different places, which was kind of good. You didn't have the us and them of the direct recruiting sort of scheme company.
You guys had bonded then, as a team.
Yeah, well, I sort of stepped away. When I got moved to Bravo Company, you were sort of in a new company of guys that had different guys with different levels of experience. You had guys that had gone off and contracted in Iraq, then come back to the Australian Army. You had so many different sort of backgrounds that had come into it. It was just cool to sort of be there. And
So we're 2009 now, and you get deployed to Afghanistan.
It's a really surreal thing, to land in Afghanistan. I think part of the underlying reason for me joining was and really wanting to go there is, how am I going to react in a circumstance that you can never put yourself in anywhere else in the world? Like how am I going to react when everyone's playing for keeps? You know what I mean? How am I going to be? Am I going to hold my gear together? Am I going to freeze? What am I going to do? Like, am I going to stay in the fight? Am I going to run from the fight? How am I going to be? And so it was sort of that sort of unknown. You get there the whole time, and Afghanistan looks like the land that time forgot. You literally look like you're in the place that we were, and we're moving through. It looks like you're in a story out of the Bible.
Back in the Bible, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really surreal, that whole feeling. And then we got our first group of orders after being there for I think 4 or 5 days we were going out and spending like, I think we did a week of it. I can't even remember, but we were spending a huge amount of time in the vehicles. You know, we had to effectively bomb them up for essentially being out for about a month, I think. Something like that. It was a long time. It hadn't been done before, which was a big deal apparently. I don't know, those sort of things were never on my radar. But I remember driving out in the vehicles and we'd done all the sort of training and everything you needed to, and you're going through the process, and like I remember driving out going, this is very real. You know, you're actually in that moment that you've pictured for so long. You know what I mean? The first contact that we had, this guy's going to hate me for it. We'd been driving for 2 days, and we'd been going through all sorts of passes and all these different roads, driving in each other's wheel track, going really slowly with guys just sweeping sort of the ground and just different, you know, the EOD techs like working it out, sort of crawling through, you know, and we had no sense of a firefight, and everything was seeming, you're starting to get used to the fact that you're there. And we'd created a vehicle harbour, and when I was sitting there, and this is, God, I got to laugh at it because it was just so random. I'm on picket first, which I thought was amazing because then I was probably going to get a chunk of time of unbroken sleep. Like this would be all right, you know, not bad. And we were sitting down, and I didn't know whether our mortars were set up, you know, or whether we were test firing anything or something. And I didn't hear the thump. I didn't hear any of that. I didn't know where their sort of platoon were at the time. But I see in the distance, like about like a K from us,
Little puff.
this little poof, and then a little ring of like dust around it. And I'm just like,
Incoming.
wait, Dave, what? Are our mortars test firing? What's happening? And he's like, come over, and he's sort of like, he's visibly freaking out a little. And I remember looking up at him and, oh, that's not coming from us. Oh, wow. And then it was sort of everyone back to him. It was the first time I heard something that just, this is a really weird feeling. It's hearing something go.
Before she hits, yeah.
Yeah, and just hearing it coming down. And then for some reason, the first one didn't even detonate. So you hear this whistle. You're like, and no matter, it's like if it's going to get you, it's going to get you. There's no point running. There's no point moving and whatever. And so everyone's done the stand to, everyone's got the gear on. I woke up, the kid, he was 23 at the time, and like he nearly sliced his finger off trying to make a spork out of a spoon. So we'll call him Spork just for that. I know he'll love it if he listens to this. But this is the type of kid he was. He wrapped his finger in duct tape and then carried on. You know, just, yeah, mind blowing. So I wake him up, right, just going, man, don't freak out, but we're getting mortared. And all I could see was the whites of his eyes. Like his eyes were so wide. Like bang, he was up. We had our gear on. This is the first sort of even remote contact that I'd ever been in. So I'm like up against the side of the car, kind of hugged in there going, okay, well, if we get orders, I'm close enough to do that. Looking around, everything's fine. And then I got so focused on looking at where it was coming from, going, where did this shot come from? Like, which is something that I didn't really have time to sort of look and assess while I was coming off the picket. And I look around, and the team next to us, which is just over, literally sitting there back in their singlets with their gear off. They've heard over the radio that it's good to go. I was on the other side of the car to my team, and I look, and they literally got the cards out again. And they're just sitting there looking at me. They go, you can take the helmet off now, mate. Like, and there's me just sitting in all my gear, just getting ready for this thing. It was, I was sort of laughing at me. I'm like, yeah, it's hilarious. One day I'll be that fine with it and stuff like that. I think, yeah, that was the first one. We had some different times, like it was hard when we're coming through a valley, and there's out in front of us, the standard operating procedure for us was blown place. You know, if we found something, that was typically it. And they said, oh, we found something, you know, everyone holds up, you've got, keep your spacing, you're doing all of those type of things. And I remember I went back to the back to the car, and you're sort of sitting there, and we're just talking crap to each other. You check that all your tires are good, and what can you do in the space of time that you're going to be waiting. And I remember sort of sitting there with one of the other guys on my team. I look across at him, and we're sort of waiting, and they count us down, and then boom. Well, like it didn't sound big enough. Like it just didn't really sound like, it's kind of odd. You're kind of used to that sort of sound. That was just this slab going off. That's weird. Just sort of sat there, and we're just like, everyone's sort of saying that. We're all looking at each other a little bit confused. And then we hear this bang, like proper bang. And one of our Serieras comes over the thing and says, like, calls the boss's call sign, and just said, we've just had a KIA. So there was a booby-trapped IED that Brett Till went up to effectively assess what had happened with the slab that ended up taking his life. Yeah, and it's kind of like one of those moments, I guess, one of those little things of, okay, so this is how
real.
serious what everything is. You know what I mean? It just, you kind of don't, it consumes so much of your thought at that stage, you know. And then it was an interesting day, but it was still I think at the end of that, one of the most inspired I've been in the military. You know, there's people doing stuff, and you've got this perception of what a hard man will do, you know, type idea. And then there were guys who were sweeping. They'd been in front of us for like 2 days, you know, and not like, you know, rotating through, doing to like a couple of hours each or whatever it is. And then within like 2 hours of that happening, we still had to get to where we were going. They were back out the front sweeping. You know, we'd just put Brett in one of the cars, you know, like I put him on a chopper later. Like it was just mind blowing that people could have the resilience and the fortitude to just step
Keep
up
going.
and be doing that. You know what I mean? And then that was something that after that sort of moment really kept my mind going. You know what I mean? Like it kept me sort of pushing forward.
Training just clicked in, and you just keep going.
Yeah, bits of it, you know, to just look and go, okay, cool.
Damien, what happened to you when you actually had that terrible explosion?
Well, so the way it's been explained to me a couple of times, and it's a few different ways. So I'm going to give you the joined version of all of them, because I've got a big black spot. You know, I have that same guy who, when we were getting hit with the mortars, always tells me about something that happened the night of it, and I still don't remember it. Like, I'm like, man, I still don't remember. Every time we see each other, you tell me about that. Apparently I swore at him or something. I'm not great with authority. And but I can't remember that. I can't remember the day around it, leading into it. I can remember bits from before it, but it's kind of broken. But what we were doing essentially is waiting for the period of darkness and moving up sort of escarpment onto a spur line to give cover with a group of snipers while the other platoon went down and did a direct action task on a group of compounds. And as we're moving up, like you do, the best thing you can do sometimes, I think, is just minimize risk. So we were doing everything that we could, you know. We're driving in a period of darkness. We're driving in each other's wheel tracks to lower our footprint so that, you know, the chances of hitting a pressure plate or something of that sort are reduced. Because apparently when one of the guys said to the boss, he said, look, if I was going to put an IED anywhere, this part of the hill makes a lot of sense. And the boss apparently said back to him, what's your fascination with sweeping hills? And yeah, so I still agree with his decision to send all of our assets to get the guys onto target. That's the important thing. You know what I mean? It's getting those guys safely onto target. So moving in, we were the fifth car in line. I think the hardest thing for me to stomach is I think the impact of what happened to me on everyone else. The sniper who'd said that's where he thought it would be was kneeling down. What they'd essentially do, they'd kneel down and they'd point everyone in the different direction. So your car over that side, your car over that side, you guys here, you guys here. He was watching it and he got to watch my car explode. It hit the right driving side wheel. It removed my right leg. My left leg was really badly damaged up to about halfway down my shin. My right hand, 3 bones were broken. The wrist was done. The elbow was hanging out a thing. Shoulder had dislocated. My right arm was broken in a weird S-band, and the thumb. I've broken that thumb like 4 times. It's really awesome. It's a superhuman little bad boy. And my nose, they tried to rip my nose off and chunked a bit of my lip. And then, so I get hit. The guy next to me who's pretty close to me at the time, he got blown out of the car. Well, not blown out, but on a weird angle, and the gearbox apparently was next to him. The kid who was in the back, the spork, he got blown out of the vehicle and woke up screaming, essentially after it, and then crawled over and started working on me. And the way they found me amongst all the rubble and stuff, apparently I was making this weird, like, raspy sound, trying to breathe, I think. Like, I'm not sure. I wasn't that conscious at the time. Like, I would like to think that I took it like a champ and was just smiling, saying things are going to be okay, but it got me pretty bad. Like, it got me really bad.
And I mean, nighttime, so I'm assuming it's pitch black sort of thing?
Yeah, so there's no white light at that stage. I think that when they're first establishing the scene, the issue with something like that happening is everyone in a huge radius has heard it. You know, if they're ready for us to be coming down, they now know where we are. You know, our element of surprise when it comes to being dark is gone. You know what I mean? So, and white light, you're essentially the only white light, the only candle sitting on a hill. It's a pretty easy target to start shooting at, you know, especially when you know all you got to do is be in a big circle of it, and chances are you're going to go close to hitting something. So, for people to turn up the way that they did under circumstances like that still just blows my mind. You know, it still does. Like, honestly, I was on the ground for 56 minutes. 56 minutes from the time that the first 911 call went in to when a chopper was there and got me out. And, like, that's
a lot of time to be exposed.
That's a long time. Like, honestly, to try looking at 56 minutes while you're looking at a clock. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's everything slows right down. But I mean, it's kind of a testament to the guys who were on the ground who, like, got me through that. Like, that's knowing that every single thing you do could be the difference between you and living or dying. You know what I mean? And then all of that time trying to put into the back of your head, this is the guy who you go out and you drink with, you play golf with him, you do all of these different things, you know, or you're pretty close, even though you come from different backgrounds, you're really close. It just is such a, you know, a horrific scene for anyone to have to watch, you know. And I've got one of the guys said, because I've asked him, and this is the weird thing, I didn't want to ask and make anyone talk about it. You know what I mean? Because I think everyone was worried about me. What was I going to think about how horrible it was? And then, but my whole worry was how were they going to think about how horrible it was? And I remember having the convo. It's only recently, like only 4 or 5 years ago. I sort of said to one of them, like, look, I didn't mention anything about it because I thought you'd be bothered. And he sort of looked at me and goes, oh, I thought you'd be bothered. Yeah, okay, it went like this. He told me the story, and like there was a time where I was trying to run away from it, apparently, which would look really weird with no legs and, you know what I mean, everything going wrong. And he had me in a mounted position with both hands on my shoulders, and he said I was trying to punch him with 2 broken arms to get him off me. And all he felt was broken arms just touching his face with a swing type thing, and he could hear my bones creak and just all of these, like the crepitus of my bones while it was hitting him. Like he said, it was just like sickening. So,
but how good were these guys to save you, to stop the infection getting in? I mean, you're a miracle being here with those sort of wounds.
There's no doctor that I've spoken to that's seen the reports. Like Andrew Ellis is the head orthosurgeon. He came and visited me when I was in hospital. That was one of the great things. He's such a great guy. He came every single day. He would come dressed to operate, and then 12 hours later, he'd come before he left. He'd come in and like say, hey, how you going? You know, like, how's things today?
This was the specialist unit in Germany, wasn't it?
No, this was in Royal North Shore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, North Shore Private, sorry. And the specialist team in Germany, I had a couple of days apparently in Helmand province, not in Helmand, sorry, in Camp Bastion, which I think might have been in Helmand.
It's a British base, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a UK base. And that was where they did the initial triage of going, can we have him survive? And I think from what I hear, my parents found out at the stage where they'd operated, but because of the amount of blood that they'd had to put through my system, like I went through like 6 times the average person's sort of volume of blood in the first operation, which kind of gives you an indication as to how bad I was. But they had me on a bed where it had got to the stage where they'd wrapped a space blanket around me, and if I couldn't hold my own body heat, my own way, I was dead. I was done. And that was the stage it got to. And that's when my parents found out. They're like, he doesn't, there's not much of a chance. If he does come through, he's going to be a triple amputee. And that's...
So when you got hit, I mean, in the team, there's always medical qualified people, but I mean, how good were those medics?
Oh man, it's superhuman.
I mean,
like
to run over in the dark.
One of them was the kid. So he's got blown out. He's concussed. He's lost an eardrum's been blown out. And he was the one who put the tourniquet on my right leg.
Well, it saves your life.
Yeah, and there's different people on the scene through it. Like people rotated in and rotated out. We had a legend called Ian Turner from the team behind us who came up and he did a lot of work on the scene of it. And he we were talking about it. Having a moment when we were having a pizza one night where he told me about. He's just like, all I heard was this guttural scream, and all I could think was this poor guy, he's dying. That's all she wrote. And then he heard Spork yell out, "He's still got his nuts." He caught my nuts in the tourniquet as he was doing it, and that was the time that I became human again and just screamed. I had this really...
You need those.
Yeah, horrific scream, and he said that was the only time that he cracked like a bit of a smile through it. He ended up... He was so tired by the end of it, the amount that it took out of him. He slept in cams that were just coated in blood.
But, I mean, the adrenaline just kicks in and you do what you do. But I'm amazed that all the dirt and shit didn't get into you, like all those guys... They wouldn't turn up with surgical gloves on. Like everyone would have been filthy and...
Everyone would have... Yeah, I think that they would have had surgical gloves.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure, and everyone had a tourniquet that you could get off and operate one-handed. And there's a different level of medical kit that everyone had, but we had 2 medics on our team and both of them had their own basic med kit, which they could sort of use to stabilise it until we had the platoon medic who could come across and really... start taking over the scene, of this is exactly what we've got to do by the book to try and get him out of here. And there's a cool story about him, I'll tell you later.
And then, the other guys then having to no doubt watch the perimeter because you're set up for an ambush and yet dying to get in to help. I mean, it's just all the thinking of where everyone was doing, what everyone was doing, because suddenly the mission just changes on what happened.
Yeah, everything's got to change. And I mean, from a leadership perspective, they're worried about losing someone again.
Yeah.
And plus, if we get hit, if there's shots that get fired, that chopper won't land. So the first shot that happens switches the chopper off, and that's me dying. And then leadership know that. Then there's sort of positions that, like one of the team commanders, we go through this the same as he does, talking about me swearing at him earlier in the night. He said the hardest decision he's had to make as a leader is to tell his team to stay back and not clutter the scene. Everyone wants to be in there. I had good friends that are sitting on either side of him that don't want to get in there, because sometimes the best thing you can do as a team member is nothing. It's sit back and wait for your opportunity to go in and work. Sometimes you have to acknowledge that you're tired and then step back and go, okay, cool, it's someone else's sort of like time to sort of shine now. But he said that was it's so difficult, and he said it like the first time he said it with tears in his eyes. I'm like, dude, it's the best decision that you've made. That's literally the epitome of leadership there. And he goes, why? It's so hard. I said, man, excellence isn't easy, but bro, look, we're having this conversation now, which means you made the right decision. Like your decision makes the difference.
And God willing, some luck, if they didn't close in on you, as you said, if they'd started mortaring the site, there wouldn't have been no chopper. The chance of getting you out in a vehicle and living, you know.
I should have a tattoo that says Lucky. Like literally, that should be my nickname, Lucky. I think with all the things that have happened, that it's pretty funny. The other week, I was I did a movie, and my character had a fake tattoo on him, like, and on his arm, and it was lucky with some dice. And it was funny, for my Instagram page, I like took a picture of it, thinking everyone's gonna monster me over this tattoo. And all I had with this was this overwhelming flood of support for how great this tattoo was. And it was, it's horrible. But yeah, I think the stars definitely align. But I think in some way, everyone can believe different things happen for a reason or anything that you want. I think that was kind of, if you believe in the karma sort of side of things, that was for the guys turning up the way they did, that was their reward. You know what I mean? And I think I'm always very conscious of that. I mean, that people did give up big parts of their mind state, comfortable night's sleep. They gave up a lot of different things to give me, the privilege of still being alive. So I've kind of got to repay that debt by making the most of each moment that I've got. Life. Yeah, I've really got to do something that makes him go, that's okay.
Living the fullest and best life you can.
Yeah, that was worth it. Yeah.
So Damien, after these horrific injuries, tell us about this recovery process that you went through.
I still think, like, looking back at it, it's the best thing to have ever happened to me. Like, it is. I think there's something about pushing yourself and having to push in different directions that I really like the challenge of, especially things that set up the way this was. I mean, my dad liked the fact that no one liked the fact that it had happened. It's not an ideal situation. But when I was sitting in hospital using my computer. I think I was playing with stocks or something of that sort at the time, and he's like, "This is going to be good." I said, "Yeah, I know it's going to be great." And he looked at me and goes, "Yeah, because finally you have to use your brain." And he'd been wanting me to for so long, like to finally be in a position where all I could rely on, I take the physicality out of it. All I can rely on is what my brain can do. And I mean that initially in theory was good, but the challenges that come with, like, say, a closed head injury and the amount of different things that you've got to go through, it was a pretty complex situation. I wasn't always the most relaxed person especially when I was in the ICU. I really didn't want to be there, and I didn't like the fact that anyone was having to do anything to me. So I was quite rude to nurses and different things like that they're sort of things. I've apologized to people over it, but there's, you'd rather your actions not need an apology. But then you're sort of in this stage where it's the way forward, you're wondering, and everything's moving so slowly, but you're sort of sitting there wondering what it's going to be like. I'm going to have prosthetics. What are they going to do at that stage? Because I still wasn't completely used to the idea that I'd lost my legs. You're looking at Americans had invested like hundreds of millions of dollars into the technology to use stem cells, like blank cells, and program them to basically be able to print skin and limbs. So you're essentially looking down the track 20 years going, maybe they'll basically be able to grow my limbs back and put them back on, and you're still holding on to little bits of those. Your mental image of yourself looks a lot different than what your physical appearance really is. Which is a really funny thing, because if you walked past yourself in the street, would you know it was you? We don't spend that much time looking in mirrors. I guess with phones and people taking selfies, they're a bit more aware of what they look like, but you don't really spend that much time looking at yourself, and the image never really looks like it does. You always kind of look at yourself from the perfect sort of angle and stuff like that, when you're getting ready to go out somewhere. And I think after being hurt, I remembered all the times that I'd thought, well, that's not exactly ideal. And then, like, the way I looked, and I look back at pictures of myself, I'm like, yeah, you seemed like you're all right. But then skinny jeans come in fashion. That's not the best thing to happen once you've lost your legs and you've got no calf muscles. You're all of a sudden working out how to operate these things, trying to look as normal as possible. And yeah, let's all wear tight ankle skinny jeans. That was just a bad turn. The way I grew up, everyone had really loose pants on. That was the whole thing through the Michael Jordan Bulls era. But yeah, there were bits of that, but that were kind of good resets for my mind, because when you're going through that, you really have to reinforce to yourself that you have little or no control over what anyone thinks of your physical appearance. No matter how much effort you put into it, they don't see it. You know, they see it for 2 seconds, maybe make a judgment or an opinion and don't care. And ultimately that doesn't matter. It just does not impact doesn't have any impact on my day, what someone thinks. And it's only after being put in a position where I've got to force myself to think like that I understand that's the easiest way to think about it, you know, and that's the best way to think about it. You know, you're not doing it to please other people or anything like that, but all because, I mean, at the end of the day, how much difference is it going to make? But they were sort of big turning points. Parts of it were difficult. I think there was a lot of, I like being, and I kind of encourage other people, especially when you're going through any type of adversity, is to just grab it and do it your way. For a few reasons. One of the main ones is accountability. If something goes wrong, you don't want to be pointing fingers. I never once thought, like with mine, oh, geez, I wonder why this happened, because I know. You're going to a war zone. You're going to the most dangerous place on the planet to do the most dangerous job on the planet. There's a chance that it might not work. It might not, you know, there's going to be consequences. You know, there may be from that. So it wasn't a shock when I woke up. I was just like, oh, okay, I'm alive. Like, let's go. Is everything in the critical triangle all right? They said yes. I'm like, yeah, okay, keep saving me. We're good to go. And like, I think there's the moments where taking control of that and going, okay, so I'm going to make the decisions around this. If it doesn't work, it's on me. But then when you start throwing in some of the people who I had to start building and working on relationships with, like physiotherapists, occupational therapists, a prosthetist, all of these different pieces which were now part of the team that I was going to have to surround myself with to get through this, there was a lot of teething sort of issues that I had through that process. You know, I mean, I still had plates in my arm that hadn't healed properly. You know, I had bones that, looking at the x-rays, hadn't really even gone close to sorting themselves out, and I was frustrated I couldn't lift weights. You know, I mean, your brain still is the same. That's the hardest thing. Everything's changed, but your brain's still going, I got to work out twice a day. I have to do it. Like it's weird. Like for people who are fit will understand this. You know, when you're getting fit, you actually notice the fact that you've got to work out. You know, that you're putting yourself through a process to get somewhere. Whereas when you are fit, you notice when you don't work out. It's the thing that's missing. And that was a hard one when you're in hospital going, okay, I got to do this. Or we went in and using sort of the rails in the rehab hospital I'm in, and there was a lot of sort of older people who were doing it as well. So you sort of sit to the side and wait. You go, there's a floor-to-ceiling boxing bag. And I just started, just a speed bag, a little rhythm bag. Here we go. Tap, tap, tap. And then one of the physios came really angrily and grabbed it and goes, you can't use that. Really? She kind of, and I said, why? And she goes, oh God, what was it? You're not qualified? Or something. It was not qualified. It was, I forget the exact way that she worded it. And I'm like, what? And she goes, you know, no one's told you that you can blah, blah, blah. And she had to go. And I literally thought, I don't know who you think you are, but you're about to get this. I was sort of like, you know my background, don't you? They trust me with some of the most dangerous weapons this country's ever owned, and you're telling me that I can't operate a floor-to-ceiling ball until you say so? Cool. That was the last day that I had her as a physio. That was the first person who I thought, okay, well, you got to stand down and move aside. I had a few other things that, you know, going through was a bit of a challenge. In my mind, I've always thought I'm a bit further ahead than I actually am. You know, that's sort of, sometimes I need to be brought back to that sort of realization that I'm at this spot now, you know, and I can evolve into the next sort of phase of motion. But yeah, I think it's always best for me to come to that conclusion. And I discovered really early during the piece that me being accountable for my circumstance and how far I wanted to push myself, even if it was bad enough to go, I pushed too far, it's better for me to push me too far, you know, to not give anyone the opportunity to be in a position of blame or something. So, and the first step was, for me, walking was always to achieve one goal. And that was because you never forget when you're in hospital what you guys did. You never forget that they're still overseas, they're still doing stuff, you know, and that there's bits that worry you. you know, the whole time. Is everyone going to be back, and what are they going to be like? They're going to have what happened to me tattooed on their mind. You can't take that out. What can I do to just show them we didn't lose that much? You know, we're fine. And in my mind, just standing there while they get off the plane, like they're walking down the thing, was going to be the best. That was the best thing I could do, is literally look as close to what I did before they left as possible. And sitting there in a wheelchair is not going to do it. So that was my motivation to be walking and standing up and doing it. And like, it was only later I was talking to my dad about it, and he said one of the doctors in Germany, because they flew over to spend like the week and a half there while I was still, you know, they were worried about whether my arm was still going to last through it. And he said, is he ever going to walk again? And the guy goes, he might. 12 months is probably the broad line. I mean, I was walking again in 6 weeks, so there's...
Good on you.
I think that's more just bad judgment from the doctor. And I had stuff to do. I was kind of busy, but yeah, like I kind of wanted the whole time I was always, okay, now I've got this prosthetic leg, now I can do this. And they go, no, we bring that to you, and then in a week you can do that. I said, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to do it now. And like there's a photo of me with my first below knee prosthetic on and a walking frame, going, okay, we're getting a handle on this. I get to keep this leg, right? Yeah, cool. I'm sort of doing that. And you just see this look of a prosthetist who's only built it to see whether my stump fits in it.
And you're using it.
Yeah, and I'm weight bearing on it, using it, just going, okay, well, yeah, this is going to be fine, whatever. And like now I kind of know, but you know, if I can weight bear on it, why couldn't I walk on it? You know what I mean? And I'm like that. And to me, I think there's parts of it where I just had to accept I was going to be powerless. But that then reinforces taking control of the things that you are in control of, and then making the best of them. And the biggest one of them, I think, that took me a while to grasp was my attitude towards things. You know, my attitude towards it and how I view success. I think the process, because success only lasts for a small moment, and you've got to keep going to the next task. You've got to keep moving forward, because for me personally, I've noticed that there's stagnant periods after something's been really successful, something that has really hit a mark that I've been working towards for years. That's the hardest bit for me, is to find the what now and where am I doing it and stuff like that. So now I try to sort of think about it, which is something I've been working on for the last 10 years, of going, as long as I'm just getting better, I'm getting closer to the person I want to be. You know, all of those moments of success are just rewards to keep you going on the sort of push forward, to just be getting that little bit better, just improving that tiny sort of bit. And that was the type of mentality that kept me going at times through, because you have these phases where, I'm walking again, it's great, I'm walking with a walking stick, this is the best. Then I'm walking with a walking stick, it takes 2 weeks and you go nowhere. Then 2 weeks later you're walking without it, and you work something out. And I think prosthetics, getting used to wearing them, there's so many different things that happen with them, and some of them you've just kind of got to learn. This means that the prosthetic's too tight, or it means it's too loose. When the first thing that your mind's saying is, this isn't working properly. Not what is it, how do I do it? And it's typically counterintuitive. It's not always, okay, it's not working properly, it's too loose. It's not working properly, it's whatever. There's a number of different things that affect its alignment. Sometimes it's whether you're tired. There's all of these different things that go into how they work. And ironing those out was a tough one. And I think coming to grips with the fact that the things that I had come reasonably naturally, which were working out, staying active. I mean, like I mentioned, surfing was a huge part of my childhood. You know, that's what everyone sort of did when I grew up, and I couldn't, without rusting, I couldn't go into, you can't really go out and go surfing. You know what I mean? Like there's all of these. I used to love getting home from work. I lived out at Coogee. I used to love getting home. If you knocked off early on a Friday, it would be awesome. You'd just go out, I'd paddle out at Maroubra, get a couple of waves, and just sit in a pair of board shorts, slide off my board, and just breathe out to the point where I sank. And then all of us, that was the only time that everything would just stop. You know, everything, no matter what it was, no matter what course you're on, no matter how tired you were, no matter what had happened, everything, you could just breathe and just go bang. There I am. You just look around and everything's just that touch slower. I used to love that moment. You know what I mean? And I think then getting home after I was hurt, you know, I've got my place I had a place at Bondi at that stage, and, you know, I'm looking at my quiver of surfboards standing in the corner, knowing that feeling it was a long way away. You know, it was the beach doesn't look that long. It doesn't look that wide, that soft sand. Like, always know from when you're young, it's hot when you're running across it in the middle of summer, but when your core can't hold you on these prosthetic legs to walk across it, that's a long, long, long way. Followed by shallow water moving into deeper water that you can't walk through because you can't control your right leg after the knee breaks. So there was all these things that were just pushing me in a different direction to what had previously been my sort of Zen space. So I had to try and do what I could to, I think, find myself again, find my direction, do what I could do. And part of that was I sort of thought, well, I was working in the development cell in the army, and they give me a job. They told me, you can have a job for the rest of your life. You can be a clerk if you want. You can be all of these different things. And
not really you.
I wanted to be at the pointy end or just not there.
So is that why you took on the Kokoda climb?
Yeah, when I was working in that cell, we had an incident. When I was in Singleton training, we'd had a night out, and I met this guy when we were out. There was these two girls who were good friends, and we were kind of on the other side of them. And he said, my name's Ben, blah, blah, blah. I said, hey, how you going, Damien? So you're in the army? He goes, yeah, I'm in the army at 4 area. I'm like, hey, I'm one of the AITs. So like, oh, sweet. So we spent the rest of the night kind of drinking and then went to respective houses or whatever. And it turns out that guy was Ben Chuck. And I got a phone call one day when I was at my place in Bondi, and like, I take my legs off when I get home and I sit in a wheelchair. It's the only place I use a wheelchair. And I get this phone call on a private number, so I'm like, it's work. What have I done this? Have I left something on, or what have I done? I didn't leave the coffee pot on, or what's happened? And I get this call, and I'm like, hey, how you going? They go, are you sitting down? I've gone, that's a stupid question. And the guy's like, look, I'm sorry, man. Like, come on. I'm like, don't worry about it. What? He's like, look, there's been a mass casualty in Afghanistan. And like, I had the same feeling as when Josh, the same feeling as when Brett, you just, okay, we're there. And then he goes, we've got like 2 guys are critical. We've got 7 really badly injured. There's 2 of those are critical. And the optimist in me that I rather the idea of being optimistic about things, for the simple reason that the whole idea of emotionally preparing yourself for something terrible means that if it's terrible, you have to live through it twice. And that's ridiculous. I don't understand the logic in that of going, well, I'm just going to think it's going to be really crap, and then if it's good, it won't be crap. And you're like, but you've already lived through it being really crap in your mind. Why would you not? Yeah, but that's another thing. So the optimist in me thought that they may have an amputee in that crash, and that I was going to have to go to hospital and sort of say, hey, man, it's all good. Yeah. Like, you just
help him through.
Yeah, you just live. It's kind of similar to before. You just live.
I can do it. You can do
the
it.
body part. Yeah, you'd be fine. You probably do it better than me. It's just one of those things. And then he goes, no, man, it's worse than that. We've had 3 KAA. And I was sort of running through my mind who was there, who was doing what. And they just said, oh, Tim Applin. And I remember him telling this joke while we were away. And God, I don't know what it was, but it was hilarious. We'd been out for the whole night and we were all exhausted. And he just said this one-liner, which was one of the funniest things. Like, sometimes when you're tired but you're delirious laugh. But I remember, like, this was full gut laugh of they're going to hear us in the next. Like,
Valley or something.
Yeah, it was, oh, God, it was funny. But, and then they go, yeah, the second one was, like, Ben Chuck. And, like, that, he was the first guy I'd ever met from the unit, outside the unit. It was just a really somber moment, like, of just God. And they go, man, and the last one, Scotty Palmer. And Scotty, from what I heard, like, our boss told me one, everyone's told me different stories about it, but Scotty was on the scene from the mothership vehicle that we had that had platoon headquarters. He ran across and was doing part of the medical work on me. He was one of the sets of hands that was on the scene of doing things. And so for me, they were like the sort of superheroes type thing. And so when they said about Scotty, I was just like, that's, like, man, yeah, I I can't really remember like that what happened after. I remember everything being in my place, turning my phone off, and then I don't know. Like I'm not. It just kind of disappears a little bit. It's hard to describe what happened. But then a couple of weeks later, they were like, we've got some guys from the chop crash. They're having a dinner here, and they want you to go. Okay, cool. Like there we go. And we're all talking about stuff, and Scotty's dad Ray comes up. And he's got this sweet little handlebar mustache. Like, just loves it. He's still got the thing. Like it is, yeah. It's a work of art, and he's talking to me, right? And the whole time we were having this conversation, there's no real way to emotionally prepare yourself for I can't think of anything worse, and I really hate the fact that I put my parents through it. But there's nothing worse than having to bury your child. It's unimaginable. It's just the only way to describe it, and I knew that the whole time I was sort of going out there. And then when I was standing there looking at someone, I was just seeing like a man who was never going to be able to sit across from his son this close at Christmas. He's never going to have, it was just physically, it was like sickening. It was so hard to do. I took a lot of the responsibility on in different times to be parents from my unit's sort of shoulder to cry on. They'd see me do things on TV or different places, and you were the first one that everyone could associate with. So you spend a lot of time doing those things, and I've got more than enough time for that. And I was talking to Ray, and he was explaining that he'd spent time in the Air Force, and was telling me about it being Scott's last trip. And I didn't know this, So he's telling me that it was his last trip before he got out of the army. I'm like, wow, because this was the last job they were doing. They were 5 days away from coming home. Like it just, and he was talking about they were going to do the Kokoda track together. So we were going to do it, and that was going to be my way of sort of showing Scotty, because he'd done so many trips to Afghanistan and stuff like that he was worth the time, type thing. Like it was like he was saying it as if he was going to prove it that he was worth it to Scott. And like when he was sort of saying that, I'm just trying to hold back tears, not doing very well, but trying my best to hold back tears. And then he just straight out said, "Look, I can't do it with him, can I want to do it with you." Okay. Yeah, let's do it. I think I probably left the same amount of time as Scotty would have if he was doing the same thing with my dad. If they were, which could have been a very, very similar circumstance, couldn't it? And I think in a situation where you're playing for keeps, everyone's got to be committed, and not just committed to those parts of the people around them. If we lose a guy, his family are our responsibility, and my family would be their responsibility, and that's the way that system works. So no matter what happened, I was doing that walk with him. I didn't really look at it. I didn't train the way that I should have. I didn't do any of the parts that, I guess a normal person who's doing Kokoda would. I went through it just with going, whatever I do right now, this is helping Ray get through. This is helping Ray get through something I can never imagine what it's like. So whatever it does to me is
immaterial.
Yeah, it just does not matter. So go through it. And we had a great time. We had a really good time out there. And I think the most satisfying thing after it was Ray then ended up, he's taken so many he runs a group now, the Families of the Fallen, and they have a dinner every year, and they all get together. He's taken like 15 or 16 families across the Kokoda track in the years after it. He went from someone who was really wanting support to being that mechanism of support for other people, and to be a part of that is just an amazing sort of opportunity just to be able to be a cog in that wheel, if you know what I mean. And that the walk itself it just hurt. It was hard, but it still was really satisfying, I think, to get through. Like, and to see the growth, it went from, I think there was a lot of stuff that, you got to get off your chest. and say. Sometimes you can think it, you can say it to yourself before you go to sleep or before you wish you could go to sleep, but being able to actually just verbalize it really, really helps. You know what I mean? I think.
And I remember listening to an account, and in particular what struck me was your tenacity, and in particular your pride that you would go until your body would stop functioning, and then the native porters would insist on carrying you because you couldn't move, and if you weren't moved on to the next place, the whole thing stopped. But how your pride would kick in when you were, let's call it, a couple of 100 metres from the next camp, and irrespective of anything, you'd switch on again and get in there.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, well, I can't imagine because I haven't suffered it, although I have a son in the army now, and I've often said to him I want to do Kokoda with him. So if he ever listens to this, I hope he and I do it, because as you and I know, shit happens, and sometimes you don't get to do Kokoda with your dad.
Yeah, it's honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, it's the best thing that you will ever do. And if you've joined the army, there's things that I got out of it, even if it's as simple as being on a hill going, like it was great. The nights we would get these sort of moments where they would tell us what happened in places like Brigade Hill, which is one of the amazing landmarks you'll go past up there, and they explain the battle. When your mind's worried and thinking about fieldcraft and the way that battles happen, and you are actually standing in a place that's happened, going, wow, these guys were on top of each other. This is hallowed ground. Yeah, I mean, but then thinking about what they went through, like personalizing the exact situation that they're in was, it's just something. And then you look at the people that are around you, and all of a sudden you get that appreciation for the fact that they're there, and it really just reinforces how important those people that are around you are. Like I think that you guys should do it. You 100% should do it.
Well, I'm on board. I just got to get. But Damien, going back to Kokoda, I mean, you were an elite military man, an elite soldier. The militia that were put together to get up those hills with no supplies to fight the Jap. I mean, it's not until you get there you can appreciate.
It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Like they literally went out, they took golf clubs. They thought that they were getting like time off, that it was like a holiday sort of thing for them. And then literally one of the biggest moments in Australian war history was fought along that track. And the terrain is just...
It's the worst.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I don't know. Like there's bits of me that just, like, it scares you. Just look at it and go, wow, this would be so scary. And then there's a little bit of me that wants to like go, oh, what would it be like? That would be really cool to be running around in that skirmish, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a weird. I don't know.
You mean a bit like picturing yourself at Thermopylae,
yeah,
with Leonidas against the 10,000 Persians.
Yeah, that's it. What have you done? Yeah, you're giving yourself the advantage, I guess. But I think that's one of the things that selection sort of does. It sort of asks people, are you the type of guy who when we, who is waiting for that moment? They ask that really interesting question in the psych exam of, if you're on top of a building, do you ever think about jumping off? Everyone lies and says no. No, I definitely don't. I'm not a psycho. And then you actually think about it. Every time I'm on a building, I sort of look down and I think, I wonder what it would take to actually jump off. If I jumped off, what would it feel like? When I'm falling, then when I hit the ground, like you kind of go through all of those different things. I don't think it makes you a nutter, but yeah, it's you kind of, what would I be like in that situation type thing. It's that little unknown type edge. I don't know. I think that's what sort of makes me think about it. And then I think about people in World War I, World War II, and some of the situations that they went through in different places. And, in movies you see the heat of battles. What you don't see is the 2 weeks shaking, scared, waiting for the next one. You know what I mean? You don't see being in a completely different country, away from anything, after having not slept, seeing silhouettes places because you're that tired, not eating, not sleeping, being sick, all of those different bits that go into it, you know what I mean? That's why I sort of think we were pretty fortunate with the type of war that we were involved in, that we had all the sort of things that we did at our fingertips. We had the training we did. We were emotionally and physically ready to get sent over, with a group of people that we were...
Well, the best
that everyone trusted, everyone to have that beret's got to have passed the bar. You know what I mean? Like, the World War II situation where you could be with, you know, a couple of other people that grew up in the same sort of suburb, and you're kind of going off just randomly running into the darkness. It sounds terrifying, especially when you've got we've got a very specific group of leaders that were built and lead from the front to do with special forces operations. You know, not just a random general who's just going, we need this portion of a country. If we just keep throwing men at them, maybe they'll submit. Yeah, cool.
Going back to Kokoda,
Yeah.
I remember you were climbing up one of these huge hills, and it just seems to go on as the landscape is there, and it goes on and it goes on and on. And a local native was coming the other way with a guitar.
Yeah, they had like 2 or 3 of them that were coming, and I thought this was just the best. I saw this kid coming down with a guitar, and you get chocolate out of the bags and you give it to them or whatever. You sort of see if they were hungry, you know. I mean, you're obviously not trying to go like overstep the mark, but he came down with this guitar, and I was just like, kid, yeah? And he's looked at me with this grin, and so I gave him chocolate, and I sat down. I tried to sort of put it in tune, and I remember sitting there just thinking, oh, because I hated folding. I hated going, okay, I'm done. Come on, help. I hated that. I still hate asking for help. And I sort of thought, what's the longest song that I know? Like, what is the longest song? And I completely disregarded the fact that we're on that massive sort of Yama. And I thought, well, Stairway to Heaven. If you stretch that out, you can just keep going between the verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. No one's going to know how long the live version goes for, like 17 minutes. Yeah. I'm fine. I'll do that. And so I sat there and played that, and never ever thought of the irony of what I was actually doing with it. It was just literally trying to buy as much time as I could. And it was just fun. I still look at that picture of me sitting there with a guitar, and with a guitar is kind of the same moment as I have when I sink down. Used to sink into the water in the ocean, you know, you kind of just disappear. You can quieten the voice inside your head a little.
A very surreal moment.
Yeah, it was. It was really cool. And I mean, it gave everyone that few moments to break away, you know, mentally and emotionally sort of break away from what we're doing. And we were doing it with a whole heap of guys who'd been injured, like in service. So it was, you know, it kind of gave everyone a bit of a moment just to step back.
So, Damien, you keep finding Kokodas, or we'll call them Everests, and you've gone into swimming and rally car, navigation and snowboarding. I mean, which of these particular fields do you especially like, and are you just continuing to find challenges?
Well, like some of them sort of fall into place. I love swimming because I love surfing, but the more I swim, the worse my shoulder gets. So it's kind of a balancing act. And the rally car navigation, that was kind of someone else's dream, to be honest. At that stage, my protected identity had been lifted. So I'd done a section with Ray Martin on 60 Minutes, and I was marketable enough for us to get support to go and raise awareness using a car. And I get this call. I'd done all the PR side of it. So you're going to like places, newspapers or whatever, and I'm smiling next to it, you know, doing the whole sponsor the car or whatever type thing, you know, like raise awareness, Commando Welfare Trust. And that was just my job. And then like 2 days before we were supposed to leave, I get this phone call of a guy going, hey mate, we can't go. And he's crying, and I'm like, what? And he's like, I can't navigate the car. He was always going to be the navigator. And he goes, I can't navigate the car. I'm like, why? And he goes, I get car sick. I'm like, what? And he goes, I should have known. I can't read when I'm on a bus. I'm like, so you didn't think to check about any of the, forget about all of those questions. I need the event organizer's name and number. Just send it through. He's gone, no, we'll find a way. I said, no, we won't find a way. I'll find a way. Send me the guy's number through, and I'll see what I can do. And we ended up flying me then straight down to Tasmania. I read a few of the sort of manuals and books. We did some test runs and stuff, and I ended up navigating the car, and I did that for 2 or 3 rallies after it. And I mean,
were these those Porsche Tassie Target things? Or?
No, we had a Datsun, a 180.
The 180B.
Yeah,
the
so
sports
it was,
model.
it had HM did great work with it and stuff, and we'd done a lot of stuff, but like I was always more of a surfer than a car guy. So to me, that was it was the raising awareness side that was the big bit for me. I've never.
And it was something that you could do, and is there anything you can't do?
Yeah, it was a bit, it was kind of like I had to. Like I put myself in that position going, all right, I've got to be good at this so that one, we don't die, and two, this is, that means a lot to him. I've got to give him the best support that I can, and we want to finish well so that we can, that's the competitive thing. And I think that's, for me, that's something that is a common thread in things I've chosen to do. I find it better for people to channel, especially if you're like me, to channel what you're competitive in, because the last thing you want to be is competitive over who's the first car to enter the merging lane when you're driving the car. You know what I mean? Like I need to have an outlet for that. And I found there's different things I've done through my journey. Like snowboarding, I found great just because it made me feel like I was surfing again. It was something that I was in control of and I could do.
Back with nature.
Yeah, ultimately you need so much support and chairlifts and people and moving and all of these different bits that to get to the Paralympic level, which I wanted to get to, it was a real uphill battle. And they had border cross was the sport that you had to be in. I broke my back racing in Park City in Utah, and it's only now that I look back that a compression fracture of the L2 is a pretty serious thing. But at the time,
in a normal body, let alone one that's already had a lot of damage.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I was just glad that was the final thing. I'd broken something on every other limb down my back. It's a complete picture, isn't it? So, yeah, and I was more worried about the 5 weeks that I couldn't race for, and then it got to the stage where I actually had a convo with someone where I was like, look, the last thing I want to do is wake up in a hot, and when you're having a convo with someone, I think we're having beers at the time, and you say something and you don't even realize that it's in your subconscious until you say it, and you sort of hear yourself saying it and go, oh. I remember I was talking to Amy Purdy and I said to her, I'm like, look, she's an amazing snowboarder. She did Dancing with the Stars in the US, and she's a double below-knee amputee, and she was just amazing in the whole thing. She then toured with Oprah. She's an amazing person. But we were in the bar sort of talking about stuff, and I said, the last thing I want to do is wake up in hospital and have a doctor look at me and say, look, this time you can't learn to walk again. We were talking about how, intense the tracks that we were racing on were. And yeah, it was, I think it was that sort of moment where I sort of thought I got to do something else. And I started looking, when I got back from America that time, I started looking at my purpose for doing things and what was I doing? Because I chased the snowboarding dream for a lot of time. A lot of people had put hours and stuff like that. I'd put a lot of effort into it. And I just sort of hit this stage where I was like, okay, I've done so many things for other people. You know what I mean? Like I've sort of worried way too much in my life about what the status quo is, what everyone's going to think of. Like what I'm going to do something that's just for me, knowing that no one else's opinion matters. What would I do then? Like I got to have that sort of conversation with myself of what would I do if I was a kid again in school? And I've always been a bit of a show pony, so mostly in an irritating way, but yeah, that's just is what it is. And I thought I would be an actor. I wanted to when I was in high school. I thought it was great. I had a hard time, but in typically acting, you get it wrong more often than you get it right, type thing. Like there's a lot of failure involved. And I thought, well, I've got that bit covered. When I was young, I didn't quite get it. I had trouble getting laughed at. No one wants to put their heart and soul into something and have it just be horrible, which sometimes it is. And so I decided that I wanted to do that. But for another reason, I wanted to make sure that I still had emotions. I'd spent so much of my time, going, you never apologize, that's, the different signs of weakness. The signs of weakness. That whole a sign of weakness, man. The toughest guys I've ever met in my entire life, I've watched break down. You know what I mean? Like, so that whole crying is a weakness thing. Not crying is more the weakness thing. That's you giving in to what people think your emotions should be at the time. Like, repressing that's just dangerous. Like, it is. You're repressing an emotion of grief, fear, guilt, or anything like that. That's just a recipe. It's an absolute cocktail for a mental health issue. I obviously didn't know that at the time, but so I thought that was, I'll get into acting and see how I actually go at it. I always visualize I'm going to be great. That's my baseline thought. I'm going to be perfect at this. That way, personally, I think walking into situations with that mindset makes you make positive decisions. You make all the decisions that essentially shape you to be moving towards the picture of excellence that you see, as opposed to looking at the myriad of things that could go wrong. You know what I mean? It's like snowboarding. Don't run into the tree, don't run into the tree. You know what I mean? It's like that same train of thought, and that was sort of what I went with. So I walked into the acting class like confident and inspired by kids around me. You know, they're waiting tables for 5 days a week so they can study for 4 of them. And, you know, there's no guarantee that anything's going to come of it. You know, I was kind of set by that stage. And that was the thought with things being like me being complacent being my biggest enemy. And that's why I sort of think now about what's next, and I've just got to be getting a little bit better. You know, each day, sit down, have that moment before I go to bed, when my head's on the pillow, take comfort in the fact that I can pick something the day that had me grow as a person, even if it's just resting to make me stronger for tomorrow. There's something I did that's going to help me get better and be doing that move forward, because my whole life, all I want to do was to work to the point where I could own my own house. You know, and that's like a 35-year pursuit or something like that. I get injured in Afghanistan. I was insurable. I was over there. I've got paid out. I own my own house. I own the car that I'd always dreamed of owning, and I'm not even 30. You know, all of a sudden all of these massive life goals that were originally the idea that you were striving for are there. You know, and essentially there's like, what now? What do you do with it now? And I found when I was in that acting class, it was kind of good that I didn't have the stress of needing to land a job. I didn't need to. You know, I could just
relax and
kind of trundle along. And like, there's times as well where you can't. You know, I mean, PTSD is it's really difficult to explain. You know, especially the way that it happens to different people. You know, and the way that it impacts me is sometimes it can dead set be impossible to be doing sort of anything. So some days you'd be going to class, some days you wouldn't, and you're going through that process. And I'm slowly working out, I think, how to iron it out. And we're nearly 12 years down the track, 12 years next month. You know, so it's and it's one of those sort of odd things that, like, to give you an example of how it can hit you, and it's done it a few times, like a few really major ones. But I was in the shower and I was just cleaning my ears. I had my eyes shut. And I don't know how I got back there or how I went, but something felt wrong. It was just like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what, and I just felt my system just starting to shut down. Like, my vision was almost tunneling. And for the next 5 hours, I was useless. I couldn't focus if something was on TV. Like, I could see the TV, but I couldn't do anything with it. It was like, in my mind, it was like I was a vegetable. I was monotone. I couldn't change anything that I did speaking wise, and there was nothing that could drag me away from it. You know, everything was heavy. Breathing was hard. You know, it was really weird, and that's one of the sort of, it's happened a few different times. There's been a couple of different times managing. It's one of those things you just try and deal with it if you can, and I guess hope, you know, because typically it's never when you're expecting it that something goes wrong. But I'd sort of wrestled with different stages of what I was doing through the side of the acting. But I got a really cool break one day when, again, why I should get the tattoo that says lucky. I was in class and I'd done a thing. Turns was making fun one day that we were overseas of one of the songs from Team America. So I tried to sing it. And I tried to use a little, like, prop. You know, I had something. I've always got something that means a lot to me. At the time, I had a similar sort of thing. This one sort of looks like dog tags, but it's something that my missus gave me that says, "You're my hole-in-one." And every time I'm doing something, if I drift away or feel any pressure with it, I put it kind of in my mouth. I put it between my teeth, and it takes me back to the time when I'm sitting at the table with her and my daughter, and she gave it to me. And then all of a sudden, everything, I kind of get back to,
again.
Yeah, I get back to square one, and it's all right, go. And then I can sort of do it. And I was using something like a similar sort of thing to that as a prop for this thing. And I broke down and started crying. And I'd tried for like a year and a half or 2 years, I tried to cry in a class because that's what, that's acting, that's drama. And it's not, I mean, people spend 99.9% of the time, 99.9% of the time trying to hide emotions. Why are you going to show yours? I mean, it just makes it look overdone. And I was in the class and it cracked me. And the guy who was teaching us, Aaron Glenane, he just goes, "Can you come and see me after class?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I thought he was just going to check on me and just say, you're all right. Like, that was pretty real. And he just goes, "Look, Nikki Barrett's casting something now that you might want to just get your manager to give her a call over it." And I'm like, "Okay, no worries." Like, this is Nikki Barrett. She cast like Gatsby and a bunch of other things. Like, she's a huge casting director. And yeah, I spoke to my manager about it. He sent an email, and then a couple of days later, I had a screen test for it. I got a Bravo Company line group of orders, and I'm kind of like, "Oh, Bravo Company. I was in Bravo Company. This might be meant to be." Trying to not have huge expectations or put pressure on myself so that I did something weird. And when I went in, I screen tested. I did it in an American accent, but didn't really think this could be anything. You know what I mean? I didn't think too much of it. And then he calls me when I was at Coogee. I was down walking along the thing out the front of where the pavilion is now. And he's like, "Man, you landed the role." I'm like, "You kidding?" He goes, "Yeah, your name's Ralph Morgan. That's, and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, that's really cool." And he goes, "You don't sound so excited." And I'm like, "Why would I be excited?" And he goes, "Mate, Mel Gibson's directing."
Oh.
And I then proceeded to go into the amputee happy dance, which is extremely top heavy, but is a very, very awkward dance, I think is the only way of saying it. So I'm like yelling and screaming and stuff down there, and just like, yeah, it was a huge moment of like, I think your world then goes into, so what have I got to do? Okay, Mel Gibson's directing it. How's it going to be? I've got to be good enough to turn up. With a great director, you've got to be on your A game the minute that you get out there. And this is my first rodeo. It wasn't until they said, "Look, Mel wants to meet with you," that it really hit me how big of a deal it was. That we went to Fox Studios, walked in with like two of the producers sitting there, and we're sitting there having a chat with them and stuff like that. And I look on the wall, and there's Hugo Weaving, Vince Vaughn, Sam Worthington, like Luke Bracey, Faraz Durrani. There's all of these guys' faces just on the wall, and there's mine sitting in the middle of it. And it got very, very real very quickly at that stage. And then they sent me a copy of the script, and I was just like, it was an amazing experience, but amazing sort of, like, Andrew Garfield as a lead, he was phenomenal. And I mean, it's good to have someone who's killing it the way that he was, because all I was interested in was getting a good enough thing for him to feed off to have the performance he should have had. I mean, he got nominated for an Oscar for that. But yeah, it was and it just was, to me, looking back, it was kind of cathartic, because naturally my guy is the guy who gets his legs blown off, which is I mean, great range as an actor. I can play a war veteran who's an amputee. That's I guess one of those things that will work in my favour. But yeah, it's good to just be part of that process. But if you've seen the movie, it's called Hacksaw Ridge.
Oh, yes, everyone's seen that.
Yeah, it's a really good film. But if you watch specifically, like, being a part of telling that story is a huge deal, and it was just, as an army guy, it's just phenomenal to be a part of. But also I prepared all of my guys when it was coming out. I said, "Look, guys, there's a movie that I've done. We shot this scene, which is a pretty harrowing scene. If you look at the shorts, when Andrew Garfield's going, 'I'm going to get you home,' he's talking to me. So I'm the guy that's under him screaming and crying."
I remember that.
Yeah. And
up on the ridge.
Yeah. So, but in the scene, obviously, I get hit, and it's pretty realistic what they did with the prosthetics. I mean, it looks great. But I told everyone who was close to me, I'm like, "Look, I took this role in this film. It's about a guy getting blown up." And this was an extra one for it, but they asked me if I knew anyone who could come on to be the medical advisor of how people had their pouches and their different things and stuff like that. Did I know anyone So I got to get the medic who kept me alive in Afghanistan. I gave him a call and said, "Are you busy? Are you in Sydney?" He goes, "Why?" I said, "Mel Gibson's doing a movie. Do you want to come and be the medical advisor?" And he goes,
Yes, please.
He kind of said, "Look, man, you're fucking with me, aren't you?" And I'm like, well, it's a pretty elaborate hoax for me to like be calling you up and saying like randomly when he's in town, Mel Gibson's doing a movie and wants you as that. So no, I'm not. Like, seriously, do you want it or not? And he's like, yeah, man, like hell yeah. And that was a cool moment for me to be able to at least give
back,
something back. But he, on the day that we did my scene, they had someone else come in. He couldn't sort of go through it, which was, and it was funny because like when we got dressed up for the first day, we got dressed up, all of the stuff on, we're sitting on the hill and it starts raining. And Mel's walking back, and it took every ounce of my strength not to look at him and go, "We didn't get dressed up for nothing." You know, like pop out a Braveheart line to him or something like that. Yeah. And I'm glad that I didn't. I mean, everyone I've told about it, like especially people on the set, thought, "Man, that would have been awesome. You should have said it." And I'm like, he's had 20 years of it. That's probably enough. But yeah, we did that. I ended up going through the scene, which was, it was interesting to live through what, you know, and my interpretation would be like, I guess, of being in that situation in the day and different things. I mean, people have seen the photos. I've posted some of them online, and I've had people complain and go, "Why are you posting photos from when you were hurt overseas?" And I'm like, "I'm wearing World War II garb. What do you think we wore? We're in Afghanistan in 2009. That stuff is wildly out of date." But yeah, it's neither here nor there. But the thing that I think really gets me with it, I told the boys, and one of them was there with his missus. She came in, she was pregnant when she came into hospital, and Chaz came to visit. She was great. And she saw me when I first got to ICU, and he was on the ground and had his hands dirty, like when I got hit. Both of them looked at it, and it's a pretty horrific scene. Like the guy who I play, the character's getting his ass kicked, and it looks horrible. It's really messy. They looked at each other when they were actually watching it. They went to the movies to see it. He turned to her, and she goes, "Look, he was way worse." Like, sorry, he turned to her and said, "He was way worse when I saw him. Like, when it happened, it was way worse than that." And she goes, "Yeah, even when I saw him in ICU, it was way worse than that." You know, and I guess that if anyone wants an idea of what it's actually like to be in that sort of moment, that's, you know, if the movie looking that bad doesn't do it justice, I think it gives you at least a broad understanding of how intense it is to be a guy on the ground in a situation where it's a real life and death type situation, you know, like the real nuts and bolts of it. And I mean,
and you've certainly been there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think more physically I was there, and that's one of the sort of battles that I have is, you know, there's guys who have to living with the physical side of it is easy because you can see it, you can touch it. It's a material thing. You know what I mean? Living with the mental side of people who've seen it, and that's the reason why. Like, I still wake up at night and I don't know why I'm awake. I don't know why I'm sweating. I don't know why I'm paranoid that there's someone near me. I have no idea. It happens reasonably regularly, but more often than not when I'm sleeping in a different room or something, I get really bad with it, but that's just, I think that's one of them. I don't see anything. I never have flashbacks that I know of. You know, I mean, the only one was that shower thing, which I don't even know if it's a flashback. But yeah, they've all become parts of, I think, managing the equation. You know, sometimes that's the best thing that you can do when you're in one of those, like I guess a circumstance like mine. You're just trying to manage it. It's the same way anyone is doing things in their life. You know, you're just trying to manage it with the things that you can control and what you can do. And I think after Hacksaw Ridge, it's really odd because you're there with like guys who you've watched in so many different movies just be absolutely amazing on set doing it. Like I was talking to Vince Vaughn about when he thought the right time to have kids were, you know, like, and you're talking with Sam Worthington about what he thought doing the voiceover for Call of Duty was like, and we're having conversations about stuff like that. And you know, everyone's literally just having the time of their life. But when you look at guys, it was such a big deal for so many guys to be on that movie. And then it's my first film. You know, I'd done a short before that where I virtually had to do nothing. You know, it was
You certainly landed a marlin, that's for sure.
yeah, and I didn't even know that I was fishing. Like that's the thing. I just knew I was on a boat. You know, it was crazy. And I mean, one of those like a phenomenal experience, but it's kind of like that. Scratch the itch. You know what I mean? Like it was like I could sort of step back away from having to do that. You know what I mean? So it was a really odd thing, and I don't think after it was something that I was gonna consistently pursue. You know what I mean? I still acted a touch after it, but there were bits of it I had. I have a pretty good relationship still with Bill Mechanic, who he was the head of Fox when they the 5 years he was there. Like 3 of them, they had the highest grossing film. Like he did that. Like he was there in the Avatar, Titanic. Like he was there through all of that side of things. Not Avatar, yeah, but definitely the Titanic and around sort of that thing. He tells his great story about Celine Dion walking in because they didn't have the sound done for Hacksaw Ridge when like 2 weeks out or 2 months out, sorry, they needed a new sound tech to come in and do stuff. And I'm like, man, that's kind of cutting it fine. You've got release dates. There's a lot of stuff riding on this, and we're having a coffee in Bondi, and he's like, all right, we had literally 2 weeks till Titanic comes out. I'm sitting in my office and I've still got the 8-track tape sitting on my shelf just to prove that anything's possible because they had no lead track for it. And then Celine Dion comes in with Heart Will Go On, and she'd recorded it in a garage. You know, she walks in with the manager and they're freaking out. Like he said, literally on the inside, he's just doing that. And then she hands him the tape and it was, perfect. You know, the rest is history. And like, I remember I had some really cool combos with him about how unfair that world can sort of be. You know, like it's not always performance based. You know, sometimes there's 3 guys and there's 2 guys who are just as talented as the other guy. This guy just fits that role better. He looks the part more, or there's all these different cruel twists. And I think with the ones that I'd suffered in the snowboarding world, I sort of wanted to try and find something that I could do that would really let me work on me while I was doing something that I could also do competitively. You know, something that would scratch that competitive itch while it still let me, I think, have something to grind towards and work towards. And I'd go up and randomly on a Friday afternoon, my dad would go out and play golf at Magenta Shores in the Central Coast, which is, if you can play golf there, you can play golf anywhere. Like, honestly, it's the hardest course that, I mean, for a double amputee, there's so many moguls and stuff like that on it. There's just every single lie. Very rarely get a flat one. There's a lot of bunkers, which sand, as we've said, isn't exactly my funnest thing. But I had a thing with a prosthetist. He showed me a new type of foot that helps people walk. I have felt about, you can sort of lean over your feet. You change where your weight line is. And I thought, I can play golf with this. I might be able to swing the way that I used to before I was hit. Like I could always hit the ball reasonably well. And then I went out for a round of golf with my dad again. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I've got it. All right. And then the next week we went out again and I was like, okay, I wonder what other amputees could do this. I wonder what other worlds there are that are, okay, so how does this do it? And people would tell me about like the legends of it, like Jeff Nicholas. I just got back from playing. He's sort of my travel buddy. He's 55, I think. You'd have to be pushing that. Jeff, if you're younger than that and you ever hear this, sorry, but you behave like you're 55. And we fly away. He qualified for a seniors masters, like a seniors major. Sorry, last year in Scotland. You know, I mean, that's how talented these guys are. With like he's missing a leg, you know, so not a proper disability, but still in its own right, it's reasonable. He's missing a foot. It's not 2 feet, but you know he's well on his way. But I mean, he qualified for a seniors major. You know, that to be playing against like guys like that was sort of my goal. When it happened, I've always had this lofty idea. I still believe that I can do it. It doesn't really matter what happens, I honestly think that that's where I'll make the right decisions when it comes to the amount of effort and dedication I have to put into it. I want to be the best adaptive golfer on the planet, and that with that comes a lot of hard work. And I think some of the lessons that you can take out of my time in the Army, like how you learned to shoot, specific things that you were doing, how you took your mind off other things that were happening, the type of work ethic you need, what you need to work on. You know, how much time to spend on those 1%ers and when work's being effective. When you're flogging a dead horse and when you're actually getting something beneficial out of it. I mean, and it was 3 years ago that I made that decision. I think my handicap was 24 or something like that at the time. The next year, my handicap dropped into, I think it was about 15 or 16. The next year that passed, I was at I think 11 or something, and now I'm at 6.
Yeah.
So I'm on the right trajectory to get where I need to go. And yeah, I was pretty close. Like Shane Luke, who's an absolute legend of amputee golf in Australia. Everyone knows about the guy from Bankstown who used to take his leg off to play golf. I beat him in the last round up in Redcliffe. So I'm on the right path to get where I'm going with it. But it's still one of those things. I honestly think like it's about I took the time to sit back and try and assess myself, you know, and go, okay, so what are my weak points? And that it takes, you know, you'd go and do corporate talks and I'd tell people about that. You know, I'd explain to people about trying to find those things, like those little idiosyncrasies about your personality that how can I get better each day? How can I do that one thing that's going to improve what I do each day? And that was sort of the conclusion I came to was I get lazy. If I know how to do something, that's what I'll sort of work on rather than the bits that I'm not great at. Like it just fit every single sort of thing. The biggest decision that I've ever made in my entire life prior to that was for the exact same reasons. You know, I joined the Army because it was the polar opposite of the way that I was living, of how I was trying to personally get the best out of myself. And that's the exact same reason why I looked at what was I doing well and what can I work on when I actually like joined the Army, and what made that successful? How can I take the lessons that I learned there and apply them to something so random and so different and then make it successful? And that I think ends where the challenge lies when it comes to me, is really implementing those things, not just explaining that they're there or showing people that you can use them. It's actually putting that into practice and making it work.
So, Damien, what's next for you now?
Number one. To be honest, number one, yes. Like in the immediate future, I think world number one's probably at least 5 years away. By the end of the year, I'll be in the top 75. So this year, in the net, I'm ranked probably 50th, but that's with a handicap involved, and that doesn't really mean that much to me. So I'm in the top 200. I think I'm 160 something at the moment. When the results come through for the tournament that I was just in, I'll crack 140. Then in 3 months, when 2 events that I went horribly in 2 years ago come off the ranking scale, I'll be in the top 100. So I should, like realistically, I should be in the top 75, if not top 50, by the end of the year. So that's got me well on my way. But I think in the main thing that I really want to do is, I know the importance of the people that are around you. You know, I've been through situations that have really reinforced how much you can rely on them and how important a solid and stable family life is. And I've got a 2-year-old girl who's just the absolute. She's the best. She's honestly so good. I love every single thing there is about being her dad. It's a privilege to be able to do. And I think that's another thing, that golf at least keeps me healthy, so that I can make sure that I'm there. My heart's still going when she's going through all the things that she's going to do growing up. And we've got another little boy who's due in June this year.
Congratulations.
So
it's wonderful.
Thanks, mate. I had no idea. Again, I'm like Captain Lucky. Like seriously, the luckiest person on the face of Earth ever. I mean, I survived the bomb through skill and some other things. There's still a bit of luck. The role that I landed in movie and so many different things have just kind of fallen into my lap along the way, where some of them you've got to be prepared. Luck's when being prepared meets opportunity. But I still keep getting these great roles. Like the little girl I've got's perfect. My partner is someone who we grew up in the same street. We have so many things in common, except she hates sport, which is kind of convenient because then I get my me time when I'm watching sport. It's awesome. And then, we've got the little one on the way, which kind of gives me, I've got to be the best version of me for them. And part of that is making sure that there's bits in check. I find I function better as a person when I have something to strive for. And it's got to be something that, like, something that's more than out of the realm of what you'd standardly think. I don't want to be my club champion. It's not just the best in Australia either. It's the best anywhere. And it doesn't bother me whether I'm playing someone who's got, like, a headache or whatever. I still want to be better than him. And that's, until I get there, it's one of those things, little sort of steps at a time, you know what I mean? Grind away the way that I can, which just seems to be going all right, but it's changed, I think, the way that I behave and how I work when it comes to my family and how organised we are and the way that we do things. And I'm really lucky that, our whole family play golf, so they're all really supportive. And I think my missus has seen the change in me. There was a lot of years when I was injured that there's some pretty dark sort of times, of the what nows, and, when you're sitting there watching time pass, wondering what you're going to do with the rest of your life, it's a really, really complex place to sit going, what now? What am I doing? Where to now?
Well, Damien, everything you've been through, you're such a force for positive thinking and action, and whether it be snowboarding and now the golf, what this country does owe to you is a great debt of gratitude for your sacrifice and your inspiration and being there for all the other guys and just being the best person you can be. And you are certainly all of that. And mate, as I say, it's just a lovely thing now that you can focus with your family because, as you know, as a parent, the greatest loving you have in the world now is for your child. It's greater than your wife, it's greater than yourself, it's greater than your mates, and you now have that as well. So I wish you well, and I know you will continue to succeed until you are number one in whatever you decide.
Yeah, will do. I'll come on again and I'll chew your ear off about what the save ins and outs of what it took to get there. I mean, thank you so much for having me on, but I think to me it's a real honour to have ever been able to wear this country's badge. To be able to serve in the military, to be able to be a part of something like that, that's part of the Australian Army that are at the pointy end of everything they do. It's just an honour to have been involved in it. You know what I mean? And it's the least I can do to try and live up to that name, to do my best to be in that position. It's, it is. I kind of look at it's an extreme privilege, I think, to have the opportunity to do those things. And I think it is. It's one of those things that really gives me a huge sense of satisfaction. And I think that's why I really like what you guys do with the podcast and stuff like that. It just gives people a chance. Like, I'm going to leave here happy that people want to know the story of an old soldier who got hurt 12 years ago. You know what I mean? And the different things. It's really great for me. So I like what you do with everyone else and giving them the opportunity to step out and tell their stories, and to your audience who care about that. I mean, it's just awesome. It means a lot to every single veteran that we can sort of stand as one as a country after the different things that we've had that are not always ideal situations, but we can always stand with our head held high.
We are grateful to Damien for coming down to Sydney to appear on the show. To find out more about the June 2010 helicopter crash, listen to some of our previous podcasts, all in Season 4. Catch Thomas Kay's interview with survivor of that crash, number 100, Gary Wilson.
In the 3 months, I'd lost half my body weight. I was below 50 kilos, and this nurse put me back in bed. She goes, "Mr. Wilson, you're in a helicopter crash."
And listen to my interviews with number 54, H Volume 5,
but the suffering and the extent of injuries that the remainder of the boys had that lived in that crash, it was just fucking horrific.
And number 92, Dean Parkinson, Volume 2.
We got hit from 4 sides all at once, deafening.
And for more on Angus's time in the 1st Commando Regiment, listen to his interview in Season 2. Number 29, Todd Vail.
I knew I was in a bad way because I couldn't feel from my waist downwards. I was paralysed. There was blood. My arm, my right arm, which felt like it was sticking out, was draped over my head, and there was blood trickling down into my eyes.
Subscribe to never miss an audio podcast, video podcast, or episode of our video documentary series, Life After Service. And check out our website, www.lifeonthelinepodcast.com. Life on the Line is brought to you by Thistle Productions. Artwork by Big Cat Design. Music by Dan Van Werkhoven. Thank you for listening, or watching, and lest we forget.